I'm Ann Ball, a program director at Maine Development Foundation, overseeing the Maine Downtown Center. Welcome to our hybrid entrepreneur community gathering this morning. We're going to have about 12 people here in Bangor, and then I think about 15 online. So thank you all for joining us. And I thought it would be really helpful to ground us to see who is in the room this morning, including two wonderful colleagues, one from Vermont and one from Ohio, who are trying to see what we're doing here in Maine. So I'm really glad to have everybody here. And keep in mind, I'm managing Zoom at the same time. So I'm sorry if you feel like you don't have my full attention. So with that, this project, which we've all been working on with our pilot communities for 18 months, has been all virtual, and we are so excited to have Matt Wagner right here in person, which you should see on the owl, with us in Maine, having gone to Monson, Skowehgan, and Lisbon, our 3 pilots. And we're really glad to have you here today to hear from our pilots and think about what is next with this whole project. So with that, I'm going to do a quick round of introductions in the room, and then I'll go to Zoom. Okay. Joy?
I'm Joy Bushin. I own Turning Page Farm Brewery in Monson, and I'm part of the Monson team with the CDP program.
Great. Gemma?
Hi, I'm Gemma Gascoigne. I'm the founder and owner of Monson Butchery in Monson, and I am the co-leader of the Community Entrepreneurship Program pilot, along with Joy.
Great. Sarah?
I'm Sarah Joy Taples. I'm the new Small Business Development Manager for the state of Maine.
Christina?
Hi, Christina Cannon, Executive Director for Main Street Skowehgan.
And if there are any issues with audio, we are all masked and it is like a deep room. So just tell me, let me know if you're not hearing things. Cara?
Hello, good morning. I'm Cara Romano, Executive Director of Fire Developers, which is an affiliate community of the Maine Downtown Center.
Yay. Stuart?
Stuart Kestenbaum. I work with Monson Arts and the Libra Foundation as a consultant.
Great. Hi, everyone. Matt Wagner, and I'm the Chief Program Officer at Main Street America.
Great. And then around Zoom, let's go with Deb.
Hi, I'm Deb Burwell, and I am delighted to be here. I'm in one of my hats, I am co-director of the Down East Innovation Network, and I'm very interested and eager to hear everything everyone has to say.
Great. David?
Dave Vogel. I'm the Executive Director of Rockland Main Street.
Hey, and Amy?
Hi, Amy Gromas-Pulaski, Executive Director, Discover Downtown Westbrook.
And Patrick?
Hi, good morning. I'm Patrick Moore, the incoming Business Relations Manager for Main Street Skowehgan.
Joyce?
Hi, I'm Joyce Barrett with Heritage Ohio. We're the coordinating agency for the Ohio Main Street program.
Melissa?
I'm Melissa Lindley, Executive Director, Gardner Main Street.
And Joanna?
Hi, I'm Joanna Crisp. I'm a program director with the Maine Downtown Center.
And Mia?
All right, I am the Vice President of Economic Development for Community Concepts Finance Corporation. I helped facilitate Envision Rumford, and I now am participating in Norway Downtown.
Great. And we were with, is it Russell from Community Concepts yesterday in Lisbon, Mia? Garvin?
Good morning, Garvin Dunnigan, Director of Planning, Innovation, Economic Development with the Central Maine Growth Council, as well as Dirigo Labs, a new regional technology accelerator program. Great to see everybody this morning.
Thanks for coming, Garvin. Nancy?
I am Nancy Ketch. I'm the Community Development Director for the Town of Fulton.
And Zach?
Zach Smesher, Executive Director of Our Town Belfast, the Main Street program in Belfast.
Thanks. And Jared?
Good Good morning. I'm Jared Reynolds. I am the Entrepreneur in Residence and Program Manager at Due North Co-working in our new Forest Industry Business Accelerator in Lyndonville, Vermont.
Thanks for joining us. And then Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz Trice. I'm the coordinator for Maine Accelerates Growth, which is a network of organizations in Maine that support entrepreneurs.
And Liz is so helpful to all of our pilots and many of our main streets as they contemplate developing spaces for entrepreneurs. Martha.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Martha Bentley with the Maine Department of Economic and Community Development, and I'm the Director of Economic Development Coordination.
And Martha is another key partner in all of this work, as she has really put on the statewide lens as well as the national lens when we're talking about all the funding. But it's great to have Martha here. She's really helped us throughout this nearly 2-year-old project. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Maggie, who can introduce herself and transition. And feel free to make use of the chat. Maggie and I are going to both try to monitor that. I also think it's a size group enough that if you raise your hand, we can also call on you that way. And I'm going to put the agenda in the chat while Maggie is talking.
Okay, great. Thanks, Anne. It's great to see so many faces here today. I'm Maggie Drummond-Ball. I'm a Director of Philanthropy for the Maine Community Foundation. And we wanted to give you just a little bit of a recap about how we got to where we are today and what we've been doing in partnership with these communities and with Matt and with Anne and Martha and Liz, and really set the stage for some of the stories that you'll hear today. So this begins 5 years ago when the Community Foundation adopted an initiative to support innovation and entrepreneurship in Maine. And we set out a vision that all entrepreneurs and innovators in Maine would have the opportunity to bring their big ideas to life. And as we did outreach throughout the state and met with our partners, we realized that we had an incredible asset here in the state. We had a very strong statewide network of organizations, resources, investors, lenders, folks who were really focused on growing entrepreneurship in Maine. And we hired a consultant to help us think about a potential niche or place where the Community Foundation could support that work and fill in some gaps. And our consultant pretty early on focused on what the experience of entrepreneurs and innovators is in our rural communities, because of course, Maine is mostly rural, and we knew that that's a place where our support at the Community Foundation might be the most impactful. So a couple of things we learned very early. Our consultant came back and said, first of all, not many folks in these communities think of themselves as entrepreneurs. They don't use that word, even though many Maine people are, and many communities have this culture already in which people are doing side gigs and 3 part-time jobs or a full-time job and a side gig, and they have all kinds of creative ideas. And this is something that is very traditional in Maine and is part of the fabric of our communities. We also learned that in spite of the fact that we have this amazing set of resources in Maine to support entrepreneurs and innovators and businesses, that many times in rural communities or for particularly underserved entrepreneurs, that connection was not being made to those resources. And so we wanted to dig into that a little bit further and see if there were ways that we could help foster those connections so that everybody was getting the support that they needed. And then the third thing we learned is that in some of the communities where there was this sort of magic happening, if someone was talking about a community, they might say, oh yeah, there's great things happening there. That's a place where people want to move. Many times that kind of activity and momentum was being led by one or two champions who were really fostering that kind of culture and connecting people to one another and leading these efforts locally. And our consultant referred to that as the hazard of one, because in many of these smaller towns, smaller regions, if we lost that one champion, we oftentimes couldn't get the momentum back because there weren't others within the network who were ready to step into that role. And everybody was relying on that one or two people who were really driving the momentum. So with all of that in mind, we went to the eShip conference hosted by the Kauffman Foundation in 2019 and had the opportunity to meet some members of Matt Wagner's team from the National Main Street Center. And they were talking about a model that they had developed to kind of integrate what they called entrepreneurial ecosystem building into their existing place-based downtown revitalization efforts. So we came home from that event knowing that this might be a way that we could address some of those issues that we had identified. And immediately I called Anne. I may have even called her from the conference and said, well, don't you think we should do this and try to figure out if the National Main Street Center would come to Maine and work with us? And so we have at the Community Foundation really benefited from the partnership and the genius of both Matt and Anne and the strength of their organizations coming into this program. So at that point, with the agreement of these partners, we developed an RFP to find some communities that might want to work with us to integrate what Matt was developing into their existing efforts at the community and local level. We had a strong response to that RFP and had a really difficult time making decisions, but ended up choosing the 3 communities that are here to talk with us today: Monson and Skowehgan and Lisbon. And there were a few reasons that these 3 communities came to the top of our list. First, they put together strong local teams that were representative of the community and of the different support organizations and business owners in the communities. Second, that they had some unique challenges and opportunities, and they'll talk about those when we hear from them today. And third, that even though they have these unique challenges and opportunities, that they might have something that other communities could learn from. So they were each just different enough that we thought they would be representative of other communities in Maine who could look at their stories and look at their strategies and understand how they might use some of those strategies themselves. So that brought us to 2020. We were ready to launch the program. And of course, very quickly realized that our original plan of having Matt come to Maine and begin his work with these communities early in 2020 was not going to be a reality. So luckily, Matt very quickly pivoted to an online planning process and did everything in 2020 virtually with the communities. And Anne was able to keep us all connected with one another through monthly check-ins. And so each of the communities received a planning grant to kick things off at the beginning of 2020, get their team together, begin preparing materials and background to begin their work with Matt. We had a series of online sessions with each community, which they'll talk about all the details of the work they did. And then each community received an implementation grant to begin putting some of those ideas and opportunities to work. And that brought us to the beginning of this year, where we knew we wanted to get Matt here with us in person if it was at all possible, so that he could see and experience the communities that he'd been working with virtually for 18 months. And that brings us to today. And so, the communities may feel that they are in the beginning of this journey, but we thought 18 months, almost 2 years in, that now might be a good time to begin sharing that learning and telling some of these stories so that other communities, other ecosystem builders out there in Maine can have the opportunity to hear this and see if there are things that we can replicate in other places or ideas that we can all share together. So I think that brings us to today, and I just want to take the opportunity while I have the mic at the beginning to say thank you both to Anne and Matt, who've been wonderful partners, to Martha and Liz, who've been really our support network and thought partners in this work, and especially to the communities who are willing to try something a little bit new, a little bit different, and have worked really, really hard with Matt and Anne's support over the last 18 months. And we're very proud of everything you're doing and very, very excited. And I hope you could see that in our site visits this week. I know Anne and Matt and I all really enjoyed being out there with you. So I think I'll stop there. Anne, if there's anything you think I've missed, please do jump in.
No, I don't think so. I guess I'll just pause to see if anybody has any questions for Maggie. Put them in the chat, raise your hand, anybody in the room. It really has been quite a journey. It's really just beginning. And I love the hazard of one, Maggie. I hadn't heard that before. That's a good one. Thank you. There were 3 people that popped in that I just want to acknowledge are here. Brett, would you just introduce yourself to the owl?
Hey, everybody. Sorry I'm late. Brett Richardson, Economic and Community Development Director for the town of Lisbon.
Great. And Nancy Ketch? Okay. We can't, oh, there she goes. All right. And Denise, we'd love to have you introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, I'm Denise Silly. I'm the Entrepreneurship Program Director for Sunrise County Economic Council, serving Washington County. It's great to be here.
Great. Is there anybody else I missed? Okay. Next on the agenda. Matt. Matt's up.
Okay.
So I guess we're going to share the screen, your presentation here. So pardon me, everybody, while we transition. See if I can get this. Where do we want to do a slideshow?
Yeah.
All right, from the beginning?
From the beginning.
Full screen?
You're in full screen already.
Whoops, dang.
No, you're okay. It's up on full screen.
Okay, great.
Yeah, you're good.
Can I have your chair, please?
Yes, we'll
Okay.
switch.
Great.
Okay, how's everyone doing? Zoom world in here, okay.
Matt, hey
yeah.
Matt, before you start, we can see you talking, but we can't really see whatever you have on the screen.
Oh, that's interesting.
Okay. All right. I had a feeling that might happen. So I was going to do this. This.
Oh, yeah.
Now can you?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, just go here.
There we go.
Yeah.
Once again. There you go.
Now do you have both?
Yes, we do. And for folks online, I'll watch the chat. If you have questions for Matt, you can plug them in.
Great. All right. Well, so I almost feel like a lounge singer or something up here on this bench, but you guys can't see that in Owl Land. But yeah, so I was given the sort of the interesting assignment here, and I'm glad to talk about kind of the importance of place within the context of ecosystem building. I was having a conversation with Andy Stoll at the Kauffman Foundation off and on over the last couple of years, because I think place has always been implied as part of an ecosystem, you know, whether it's you're talking about financial capital or the role of social capital or whatever. And the problem is when you with the implying place, it often, however, doesn't get worked on, okay? It's thought to be there, but what you see in communities that perhaps aren't, making as much headway as possible is oftentimes it's because place is not part of the conversation. And so I'm going to sort of make that sort of argument, and we see it firsthand in the value of what this pilot initiative was all about. I also will talk a little bit about sort of the intersection, I think, between community-based ecosystem building, sort of the place-based model, and sort of high-intensity ecosystem building, what we typically think around, the research triangle, Silicon Valley, or any group that's working in maybe the biomedical side or life sciences, high-tech ecosystem building, is like, where do those things come together, and how do they support one another so that they're not necessarily two distinct things, but they're complementary ecosystem building efforts. So with that sort of context around my remarks, I'll proceed here. So from a Main Street perspective, and I'll kind of get on why we became involved, but certainly there are sort of bookends here of conversation. One is like what's been happening, sort of the launch or the development of entrepreneurship within the US. And what you can see very clearly is that we've been on quite a decline over the past 4 decades in this country. And a lot of that has to do with, sort of risk, support. It can do with capital markets. It can do in sort of how we articulate to our own children about going to college and finding a job versus going out and starting your own job. So there's a lot of conversations and a lot of sort of background to why this has occurred. But I think it's just important to note that that's kind of the projection we've been on, which has largely been diminishing quite a bit within the country. On the other end of kind of the business life cycle, we also had this very large generation, the boomer generation. And, from a Main Street perspective, if you drive around any downtown in Maine or any other part of the country, and you look at those institutional businesses, what you commonly see is that
Apparently they're not seeing your slides advancing.
Huh.
Sorry to interrupt. It's a little bit of a mystery. I can go get
Okay.
Ashley.
Let's go to display settings.
Sorry, guys. Thanks for letting me know, Maggie.
No problem. I'm sure it's,
Yep, does this
there it
change
is.
anything?
There it is. We got
There
it.
Okay, all right. I became a techie overnight. I don't
That was
know.
great. Thank you.
So at the other end of the spectrum, we have quite a bit of retirements obviously happening. Many of those represent institutional businesses in our downtowns, from a Main Street perspective. And that's concerning, especially when you figure that most small businesses don't have any sort of succession planning. Oftentimes in the ecosystem world, because we say the verbiage entrepreneurial ecosystem, our mindset goes to the launch phase and not necessarily the sort of the whole complete life cycle. And so, there's not a lot of kind of like work happening at this point to transition some of those businesses, whether that's through acquisitions or just good planning exit or succession or what have you. So that's also concerning from a Main Street perspective because we don't want to lose those businesses. They represent, sort of the local institution, and oftentimes there's that sort of affinity between that business and what it's become known for and the kind of the quality of life and fabric of that community. So very, very important from that vantage point. And then in the middle, as you can imagine, and this was probably front and center during COVID, is you had a lot of businesses that maybe had reached some maturity or were needing to pivot even prior to COVID, or looking to grow in scale. And oftentimes within the ecosystem, that too was not necessarily being sort of considered, and who was working with those businesses to better understand what was happening from a trend perspective, what was happening in terms of new emerging challenges like we're seeing now with like workforce to supply chain, issues. And so thinking through those aspects as well is becoming ever more important as a consideration within ecosystem. Is what you can see here with the American Express study is that in essence, the thought of, pivot, the most overused word in 2020, will continue. That businesses will have to factor in much more agility. We were talking in Lisbon yesterday, and Tracy from Frank's, is that her name? Yeah, Frank's it's a restaurant in Lisbon, was talking about there is no new norm. It's like every day is something different. Like I can't rely on anything because it's constantly changing. And so, those are the kinds of things that we have to continue to factor in and are learning more about. And in some ways, how the language, especially in the small business world, has just gotten grown much bigger, like from a concern perspective about how they have to think about their business. The complexity is so much greater than ever before. And that makes our life in Main Street, or as people working with small businesses, ever more complex as well. On the flip side, there is just tremendous opportunity. So if you sort of contrast what's been happening over the past 4 decades compared to what is happening now, it's like the light switch has just come on, and everyone is looking in some form or fashion at how to launch a business, go into a sort of a side gig, they've got or a side hustle, that a lot of people are obviously getting in this realm. This just showcases that this is not just a US phenomena, but in other parts of the world, but the US is truly experiencing just a massive dose of new launches out there. I think, and I made this quote, but it's somewhere like between 2019 compared to the whole year of 2020, we had about 3.5 million more new business formations within the country. And I think in between Q2 and Q3 of 2020, the amount was like a 77% increase just in one quarter's transition. So quite a bit of like sort of pipeline development coming into our worlds, both at the sort of high intensity level, those businesses that are looking to employ to scale, and those that might be sole proprietors or single member LLC kinds of businesses. It's happening at all ends of this sort of spectrum here. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, this happened also after the Great Recession. But there's, because typically entrepreneurship will track unemployment. As unemployment rises, rates of entrepreneurship also, which also is a reason why, because we've had historic low unemployment pre-COVID, that we weren't seeing lots of, new business formation. This is quite different. It's not a housing crisis. It's not a sort of economic sort of challenge in which capital is constrained within the markets. Here, capital is like flying everywhere. Interest rates are low, bank loans are pretty easy to get, people's home equity is off the charts. So, things are being able to be leveraged like nothing else. Barriers to entry are much lower. I mean, you can open up a business like that online and be selling anywhere in the world 24/7 with easy logistics, now supply chain as it is right now. But given the dynamics, it's still pretty easy to launch a business right now. So one of the critical factors, I think, for all of us as sort of, ecosystem builders, wherever in the spectrum that you are, is really the importance of entrepreneurship to our economy. And from an economic development perspective, and the argument that we make to our friends, our economic development friends, is that yes, we understand that business recruitment, trying to go out, finding new businesses, attract them to a community is important. But if you look at the data, just look at the data, look at research, what you find is that there's a much, much higher return on investment when you look from within, and especially in rural economies. There's very few big transitions of economic capital, even though capital can flow anywhere, in terms of big companies moving, investing. I mean, those are big time shots. I mean, I think Ford put in 11 billion now, and now it's 11 billion in Tennessee and Kentucky on a big plant. But those are once in a lifetime. Amazon's a once in a lifetime kind of thing. And if we're staking all of our sort of economic development capital in that realm, you're really missing the opportunity. Again, when you look at job creation, business creation, it's mostly at the small scale. And so this is a research, some research we did this past year of about 2,500 small businesses across the US. And summary, and you guys can read this, but about 74% of all the business activity within those communities was happening from people that were living there when they launched their business. They didn't move it from somewhere else. They didn't move there and then start. They were right there. Now, that's not to say that we don't want to encourage those other aspects. It's just to say that you're kind of missing the boat if you're not building, you know, a resilient, sustainable, inclusive ecosystem in your community that functions, right? That is mining that talent. That there is implied human capital there that we can draw upon to support our main streets, to support manufacturing, where those numbers are still really high in that sector, high-tech businesses, or even online companies. So a lot of that activity is sitting right sort of on your back door. We just have to go out and create the system to support that. So this is probably something very familiar, this outline of a typical academic circle of an ecosystem. As I stated sort of in my opening remarks, however, place, a physical environment that supports those entrepreneurs has typically been missing from the dialogue, okay? And so this sort of begins the story of how Main Streets started to become more involved as ecosystem builders, okay? And again, I'm using sort of internal language. I think, you know, Maggie really pointed out that, you know, the language part is also really important. So if, you know, as you're out there talking within communities, you know, talking about ecosystems may not be the best approach, but, you know, how do we support our entrepreneurs? It's the other big thing is we found that we actually had to commonly use the word entrepreneur and small business together, because some people, when you say entrepreneur, they automatically think of someone like coming out of their home or whatever, just starting. And we have to make sure that when we're talking about ecosystem development, that we're talking across the life cycle. And so using those words together ensures that everyone feels, okay, I'm being supported wherever I'm at in my journey. So how we sort of got in this is that if you think about kind of the principles of Main Street, we're a 40-year plus organization that's been working in downtowns and urban commercial districts all across the country, and really looking at sort of the physical environment, the external variables that better support small business, you know, development, small business scaling, growing, et cetera. And we also tend to work in rural economies. And as many of you know, here in Maine, in rural economies, you may not have all the capacity, all the resources, even the staffing levels, but often in Main Streets, what we find is that, you know, they may be the only staff person there that's kind of working on critical economic development issues. And so this survey that you see here was from 6,500 small businesses. And we asked them about, during COVID, where did you seek assistance? Like, who connected you to these important like financial or technical resources? And as you can see here, Main Streets were the top. Now, obviously, if you didn't have a Main Street program, you know, we were looking at our Main Street programs to get this out. But, you know, when you think about critical connections, Main Streets have always been sort of that connector, that convener. They may not be providing the actual education or training or what have you, or even financial capital or networking, but they connect you to those resources. And it's that sort of connector and place perspective that really have come out is really keys in ecosystem building. I took these pictures, not yesterday, but 2 days ago in Skowhegan of the Maine Grains area, because as I walked around Maine Grains, it sort of personifies the value of place as related to how that business has grown in scale and sees itself as part of the ecosystem. And in fact, is almost like a microcosm ecosystem because of what it does as a small business. And there's places they built in for community connection. They use the parking lot, right, Christina, for the farmers market. And that's where sort of people come together, obviously. There's this sort of garden area where you can eat, sit, talk, work, what have you. That's where the synergies and sort of this serendipitous connections between people come together. We all talk about in sort of a third space context that's so important to entrepreneurs being able to network and share ideas, and maybe innovation and creativity occurs at sort of those crossroads. And that's what place does and allows for when you do it right. If it's barren, if it's not pleasant, those connections don't take place. They're creating opportunities for other businesses as part of that particular space. And so you've got the creamery, you've got the pizza dough company, and it's almost like a whole supply chain ecosystem happening there. And so all I'm suggesting is that place, and visually you can kind of see the connections of what place can do. It's the same reason why microbreweries, if I were to ask everyone on Zoom and here, where do you typically go to a microbrewery? They're usually in like an old downtown building. We were just at one yesterday, the Olive Pit, and that's going to be opening in downtown Lisbon, or an old warehouse building, but they're not generally stuck out in an industrial park somewhere.
Sorry, I have to let someone in.
And so, again, places being connected to how small businesses overall, whether you're in the technology world or opening up a professional services building, that place is becoming part of your brand identity. It's a way to connect to consumers, to your workforce, to where you might want to live. It's all surrounding that. And if you don't have that part of the ecosystem working, it really suffers on the other parts of it as well. So we would contend that place sort of marks this important intersection between the work of Main Streets and community-based ecosystem builders with those that are looking to work perhaps with larger scalable businesses or technology businesses or whatever, that there's a lot of complementary measures here. So we think if you look sort of outside the traditional sort of academic part that I talked about before of ecosystem building, what you see is that ecosystems also need housing. And we know that can be an issue, especially in rural economies. You don't have places for people to live. How can they grow their businesses or scale them or attract talent, human capital to your community? It takes third spaces. It takes these other sort of implied real estate components to an ecosystem. And in each community, I got to go to one. I was at a co-working space in Monson. We were doing planning in the new entrepreneurial hub that's going to happen in Skowhegan. Same thing in Lisbon, that those become part of the fabric, and they're all in their downtown areas. There's even things like recreation and trails. Look at Runner River. That is actually a huge part of the ecosystem in many respects, and also can lend to a sector effect for ecosystem in the outdoor rec space. So again, those kinds of things really matter. The civic functions that you find in a specific place like a downtown also matters. Access to City Hall, permitting, the libraries. I think in almost every instance, we've had like library folks involved as part of this, and they're part of the critical factor. Cultural activities as well. And then what we call place-based programming, everything from pop-ups to pitch contests to farmers markets, holiday markets. These are things that allow an entrepreneur to, in many respects, fail fast, test markets very cheaply. And again, these are things that commonly occur in the realm of a downtown Main Street effort.
Matt,
Yeah,
there's one thing we found in Monson to add to your list,
what's that?
a laundromat.
Yes, that's right. That's
Like
right.
it's kind of a critical
Yeah.
issue for
Yeah.
their community.
You're right. You're right. I'm gonna add that to the list. So just from a process, for those that are interested, and I'm not gonna go into sort of the outcome, because that's what our fine folks from our pilots are gonna be talking about after this, but just to share a little bit, if you're interested, especially the other folks that weren't directly involved in the 3 pilots, if you're kind of interested in the process. And I'll just note that if you're interested in the resources that we utilize, and in many respects, we were using the pilot to then formalize the resources. So some of this, I won't say we made up as we went, but we certainly refined as we went. And through some support from the Kaufman Foundation that kind of layered onto this, we took the learning and some of the tools and templates that we were using, and we refined them into a self-guide that anyone can use. You can download for free. It's on our mainstreet.org website. And this is the all because we were able to work with our great partners here in Maine. So just to let you know, you might have to put your email address in, but that's it, okay? All right, so just some of the inputs, because obviously there's a process in many respects to what we used. However, I will strongly sort of concur with another statement that Maggie brought up early, is that leadership matters. And that goes with, it may sound obvious, but you really see it in the context of these 3 communities. How we ever got so lucky to select the 3 communities we did, because we used the same process, and in each case it may have taken on a different outcome from a project base, but in each one they're becoming highly successful. But the process was only a small part. It was really the leadership that we were able to engage with from across the board, the entrepreneurs that participated. We had regional folks that participated with locals. And so that's really what it takes. And so you can have great process, but it's got to start with the people around the table that are sort of engaged in this. And maybe that's the hazard of one.
Oh, yes.
Yes, yeah, maybe that's what it is.
Yep.
So some inputs that we utilize in this, each of the communities went through a process of just engaging their entrepreneurs, broadly speaking, with some survey work. All of these tools are also available on our website. So like a Survey Monkey tool, if you want to use it and then adapt it to your own use.
And I'll just intersect, because I'm sure people are wondering online in the room, that we will be sending out a link to these resources and the recording and a list of attendees.
Yeah. And this is where Maggie was talking about our sort of pivot, because then we also used a bunch of, I don't know how many times we met, but for a few months, we were like, I don't know, I felt like I was in everyone's living room. But it provided an opportunity to be much more high touch and intentional with the work that I think if we would have been in the communities at the start, we may not have gotten. I mean, I feel like I know everyone that's part of these teams much better, and knowing the communities and then just being able to see it this week just really brought around context. We also had a series of focus groups. So we used, for at least the entrepreneurs, we used the survey to kind of set up the focus groups where we could identify some challenges and then go deeper with focus groups, or just, open it up and hear from them. The aha moment for, I think, all the communities and for us on the teams, as we were talking with the entrepreneurs, was one, they often didn't know each other, which again, think about the social capital aspects of ecosystem building. And two, like, they didn't want to get off the Zoom call. I mean, they wanted to continue. And even the group that was at the table in Lisbon yesterday, many of them were on that. And I think, you know, these affinities and discussions around, boy, we need to continue this. There's support that we can give to one another. You know, ecosystems, I think, work better when they're bottom up than top down. And that's part of this process allowed for some of that to get created, because it built bonds that maybe weren't necessarily there, or people didn't know about, or just didn't frankly have the time to develop. So this is just a series of questions. Again, if you want to use this as a template or just a starter list, and helps to kind of formalize these are kind of just rules of thumbs. So we had 2 focus groups, one with the area of businesses. These are just some questions that we used. I'll go through this quickly. You guys can.
And we'll also send the slides to everybody.
You'll see this. And then we also then spent quite a bit of time with the service providers, the financial capital people. And the key thing, especially given, the size of the communities that we were working with, is to make sure that we had both locals, but also regional folks, because oftentimes, if you think about the complete ecosystem, a lot of those services weren't found directly right within those communities. And so it was really critical that we started to build trust and relationships as part of this, because sometimes, again, the services or the things were there, but businesses didn't know about them, or the key connectors within the communities maybe didn't have necessarily those built-in relationships. We also, through this process, had formalized a little bit more, and we continue to fine-tune kind of an assessment or an audit tool. And the reason being is, if we just were to say, let's talk about financial capital, one, it's a pretty broad topic, and two, people tend to relate to tactical elements. And so we created these indicator questions that would allow the communities, through each individual service provider lens, to kind of think through from their perspective, how are we doing as a community? Were these things available? Were they functioning? And so we created this. Again, this is something else that you can download. But one of the key aha moments, again, trying to illuminate those for you during this process, is we really hammered on kind of like, make a decision. If this is a weakness, is this something that you as a community need to sort of attack or have in place? Or is this better served regionally? And again, I think that's another kind of importance to the ecosystem is, yeah, a community needs it, but not everything has to be right in that community. It's sometimes scale is a better solution at a regional level. And if you can pull those things in. So with each one of these, we kind of went through and rated them, but we also kind of made sure, and this is how it played out. This just gives you Monson, okay? Not as an example, small community, doesn't make sense to create like a big like financial program or something like that that's maybe better served with a regional CDFI, but they need to be connected, they need to be aware, and those relationships need to be built. So in each case, we kind of went through, saw maybe what wasn't working. These are, I think, some place-based kinds of things. And, we made some decisions about, okay, let's link regionally, or like in the case of the pop-up, this was something that they felt we needed space and we needed places for fail fast. And so one of their projects that they worked on was this cottage, which I think I had a picture of in one of those. And so already from going through this process, they knew this was going to be something they wanted to work on locally. And now through the pilot initiative, we're able to implement over the summer. And then this was something that we actually just added. This wasn't part of the pilot, but it was, again, an aha moment a little bit later down, is that, dang, we should have really taken all this stuff that we inventoried, and we should have really crossed it with whether or not we were servicing businesses and entrepreneurs throughout the life cycle. Because, it's one thing to document it, but if we're so much in the weeds of the launch, then we've got all these other businesses that we're not really working with or helping. So this is kind of another just simple template, and people can adjust it however they want, but it's just to make sure that just like in Main Street, we have the 4-point approach, be comprehensive. An ecosystem needs to be comprehensive as well across the life cycle. So here's another four points, Anne. Okay. And then finally, and I think this was probably the most critical part, and we had a lot of discussions about like organization and how organizations relate and work with one another. Even in Monson, we talked about organization structure, having that conversation in Lisbon, as well as an incoming, right? Affiliate, that organization matters. And so rather than just map the ecosystem and think about like recommendations and implementation, projects to implement, how are you going to be able to do that? And so we spent time, and this is just a template that developed out of that, was what is the role of each of the service providers? Who's going to be the primary? Because I'm not aware, but again, my experience may be more limited to, obviously the main streets, but like not a lot of groups are owners of the ecosystem. We tend to be role players, and we tend to be focused on the financial piece, or we're building out networking opportunities or what have you, and Main Street's working on place. So this was helpful in kind of helping us to organize and really see who's playing a role where, who's going to take a lead. And that way we kind of know what our space was. So this is from Skowehgan, sorry, Christina. And this is straight from the service providers, each one of them thinking through using that template as a way to document. And this is an agglomeration of those. And now each of the partners kind of know where they're at. If there's projects or programming that comes up, like who needs to be at the table. And while it doesn't always function seamlessly, I mean, it takes the right people at the right time, right? But it at least helps to document. So when you're looking to implement, engage on projects, you know who the players are and how they perceive their role within the ecosystem. So I'll just conclude with kind of some closing thoughts, some things that we're learning or trying to adapt to, and I hope this doesn't sound sort of too soapboxy. I think I mentioned this in Lisbon the other day, but we're growing concerned from a Main Street perspective about this era of dispersion, and that where and all that is to say is that we're in an economy now where place may be losing some of its significance. Saw this during COVID. You can be stuck in your home 24/7. You can shop there, you can work there, you can recreate on your Peloton bike there. You can do just about anything and not engage with a single person. In fact, there was a young entrepreneur in Lisbon yesterday, and we were having that conversation. She goes, now I get a little nervous when I go into a business. Like I feel I lost some of my social skills. Yeah. I was in Texas 2 weeks ago for my first live presentation in close to 2 years. And I thought, oh my God, how do I do this? What did I do before? What was my shtick? And so all that is to say is I think ecosystem builders have a really profound role to play in sort of fighting dispersion. Because if you don't have that critical connectivity, that engagement amongst entrepreneurs, I would contend that you really don't have a successful ecosystem, because it's at the crossroads, that those sort of happenstance conversations that happen between leaders in ecosystem building in Main Streets and entrepreneurs. That's where the real growth, the real scale, the real sort of engagement happens. And so if you're just stuck in your house or only going online to school, now we've got telemedicine, all these things that are growing, then I think that really lose out in the long run. And so not to put all of you on the spot, but I think all of you are critical players in sort of leveraging the good of dispersion, but also fighting some of the challenges with dispersion. And then finally, some of the things that we're also working on is how do we ensure that we're also creating equity and inclusiveness in our ecosystem building. And sometimes, obviously in rural communities, I think when you say diversity, I think we need some better definitions there. Because diversity cuts across not just race and ethnicity, but also gender, age, maybe someone that served in the military, to those with disabilities, to youth, to people coming in from the outside versus long timers in our community and how they're engaged, to even how do we fight displacement, given sometimes what we're experiencing right now, where I was just working in Northern California, working virtually, and people are coming up from the San Francisco Bay with oodles of cash and, you know, disrupting local rural markets. That's sort of a form of diversity that needs to be thinking about inclusiveness and equity between locals and those coming in from the outside. So we're looking at how do we use GIS a lot better in the ecosystem world to better identify populations, so that we can see the diversity in our communities. We're looking at places like Miami and Alpharetta that's really done a good job of building a entrepreneurial equitable development plan as an overlay to their ecosystem. So these are some things that we're thinking about as we continue to kind of grow out the tools, resources as part of kind of place-based ecosystem building. So that's it. I'll take a breather and
Wow, they can hear us.
I'll just say big thanks to Ann and Maggie and Martha. I thought we had an awesome team, and to the locals, because they're the real champions here in all of this. We were just facilitators. They're the doers, the people that make it happen. So it's been fun, and thanks for all the hospitality this week and all the communities too. Love in Maine.
Maggie, on that last agenda that I put in the chat, do we have time for some questions?
We do, yeah. We really have until 10:30 for this section. And if it's okay, Anne, I'll just take note of a question that's in the chat. And so this is for Matt, but I think also is useful for the communities who are going to talk in a little bit to just think about this question in their own efforts and what they know about their own entrepreneurs. But the question is it true that small and medium businesses start with small vision and stay small versus innovation-driven businesses starting with big visions? Or are there some good stories to share of people starting small and growing big? And I think when we're talking about sort of that division between small and big and what small vision and big vision means, I think we're talking about like businesses that are primarily local markets, accessing local markets versus accessing markets regionally or outside of Maine or globally, and also just the type of business. So Matt, if you want to say a few words about that, and then maybe the communities can when they talk too.
Yeah, it's such a personal decision in many respects. You can have the same sort of business in a similar sector, and obviously their trajectory much different based on what's the goal of the business owner themselves. What are they trying to accomplish? I don't think that scaling is a sector exclusive to certain sectors. I mean, we saw it firsthand. Look at Scott. Look at Maine Grains. And how they've scaled and an ag food-based market. And so I think it's really about having support systems that work truly across the board. And so I guess that's all I would say on that. So don't judge the ability to scale based on sort of the sector that it's in, I think is the big thing.
Yeah, and I think I would add that as we think about what ecosystem building means, we're really talking about creating the conditions that will help people be successful, regardless of whether they are mostly thinking local or mostly thinking beyond local. And that there are ways to really make our networks support both of those types. David, I can see your hands up.
Thanks. You actually kind of lead into my question, kind of what you were just talking about. Kind of reflecting on one of the slides on kind of the opportunity for serendipity, something that we've been thinking a lot in Rockland that I'm looking for help from this group on is how important kind of a critical mass of people focusing on a same domain or a same problem set. Like how important is that for kind of that serendipity to be like a factor, right? So like said another way, like we're trying to understand for collisions of entrepreneurs to happen, to kind of think about new businesses that might spur up. It seems like they have to be working either on a similar problem, coming at it from different angles, or in a similar domain. But one thing that we're noticing happening, at least in Rockland, is I'll use our tech kind of innovation happening. Like people are working in different systems, people are working in different code bases, and so it's hard for these collisions to happen, or for that serendipity to take place. And so, kind of the long-winded way of getting at, like, have you all experienced that domain density is a critical factor in that, or is it really irrelevant and it's more just about kind of the scaffolding like you all are referencing? Can anybody share any insights on that?
Anybody? Any thoughts? Matt or Maggie?
I didn't want to dominate the conversation. We got a lot of ecosystem builders on that.
True, we do. We do have lots of ecosystem builders. You're right, Matt. People are pondering.
Well,
go ahead, Matt.
I know this will directly address it, but I'm just a true believer that form of kind of like innovation, ideation is best served with the diversity of people's different backgrounds and experiences. That's traditionally how corporate R&D has evolved to. And that, so if you're working on sort of a common problem, but looking at it from different vantage points, I think is probably where you're best served, because I think those different lenses are just so critical to problem solving. And it's just like in Main Street, we talk about this, is like, don't get in silos. And so I think just breaking out of that, whatever the context is at least a good first start.
Can I ask a follow-up? Is that okay? Or do we need to move off that?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's expanding on that. So do you feel like, because that's where we're stuck, is it diversity of perspective and life experience and skill set, looking at the same kind of domain problem or problem set, like we've seen in like kind of commercial street kind of, or like the commercial street stuff that's happening in Portland, or like in all these different areas in Boston, where it feels like every single kind of block or neighborhood is solving for a different X, right? Like, is that what's most important, or is it just kind of getting everybody together and seeing what shakes out? Like how much should you control what people are focused on, and saying like, hey, we're going to all really try and attach our place brand to a group of people solving this kind of problem set, and all these different looks at it first, just kind of letting it happen organically?
I think you have to have intentionality. I mean, I think there needs to be framework around it. Otherwise, people are all over the place. So if I'm understanding you correctly, I mean, I think you do have to narrow it down to the subject matter, and then have diversity of thought and engagement within that.
That's helpful. Thanks.
Can I just add one piece to that? I think, and I'm going to sound wonky and academic, but here we go. I think that we're seeing a transition from sort of, I've now been in economic development long enough, that there was sort of this cluster development, with sort of the way of doing things of saying, okay, if you can bring together people that have similar markets, similar talent needs and, that sort of industry cluster piece, that's going to be really the way that things work. And I think we're seeing sort of that transition of that to more of this sort of ecosystem building and recognizing that often groups that are in similar but not specifically the same industries are really where there's really opportunity for serendipity and touch points. And I actually think sort of Village Capital is one of the best sort of groups that have iterated kind of the accelerator concept around, similar problem statements, but coming at things from really different ways. So they're really getting at that, maybe a similar goal, but really coming at it from different, sort of industry perspectives, markets, and that sort of thing. So I'm not sure that the way that we are organized, I think we still very much organize ourselves in those sort of clusters and sectors within the state, the way that we sort of think about things, but it's those intersections that really are where the excitement lies, I think.
Thanks, Martha.
So we have come up on our 10:15 break.
So we're moving on to the part of the agenda where you are going to hear from our 3 pilots. We're going to start with Lisbon, and then we're going to, who's next? Okay, we'll just go alphabetically. Monson and then Skowehgan. And each of the pilots is going to share for somewhere like 5 to 10 minutes, and then some Q&A for them. And I gave them some prompts. They don't have formal presentations. It's going to be more conversational. They're going to talk to the owl and they're going to talk to the people here. The prompts were what worked, what didn't work, what would they tell a new community starting out in this work, what new partnerships did they make? Anybody else remember the rest of the prompts? Yeah, that's about it. They've been working really hard this week in preparing for Matt's visit, so I didn't want to require them to make formal presentations because we really just want to cheer them on. And I think that's about it. So with that, yes.
And can I add just one prompt for the communities? Please. Just thinking about in a practical sense, it might be helpful for some of the other communities to hear a little bit about your teams specifically. So what's the makeup of your team? How has it functioned? Do you feel like there are others you need? That kind of
perfect.
Just intro.
Great context setting. Thank you. So with that, Brett is going to come tell us about Lisbon.
On the stool?
I guess you got to take over the stool. Yeah.
It was kind of comfy up there.
Do I need a stick?
All right. So yeah, there you go. You tell me how it feels. I'll take your seat. And I wonder if I should put it on speaker mode. I don't know. Let's try that. Okay. Oh, it always
It's
goes
on
to
Maggie.
Maggie. It goes
Maggie,
to
you're always the star.
Unless I talk.
Try talking.
Hey, everybody. Brett Richardson, Economic and Community Development Director for the town of Lisbon. That's so cool. Lisbon's a Main Street affiliate. So, and I think has been for 10 years or so. And in terms of our team, to Maggie's point, we had a really good representation. Lisbon's about 10,000 people for folks who aren't aware. It's located in between Lewiston, Auburn, and Brunswick Topsom on Route 196. So about 30 minutes north of Portland. And seeing a lot of investment because of the proximity and good energy that's coming up as folks migrate to to Maine and look outside of Portland. So really good things happening there. Our team, I think, was representative of that. We had a town councilor, members of the planning board to represent sort of the policy side of things. We had a nice mix of entrepreneurs that included sort of contractors and trades folks who are taking over family businesses and looking to grow, all the way to local restaurateurs. I think Lisbon has seen some investment and some really good new sort of food offerings. Matt mentioned Frank's Restaurant. They actually won a Main Street award a few years ago. So that they were participating, a couple financial folks, and then some a Blue Ox Malt House to stick on the grain theme, with Skowehgan. We have the nation's, I think, second largest traditional floor malting malt house in the country. And so Joe Alex participated in that. So really a nice range from sort of small sort of lifestyle business entrepreneurs to more growth oriented entrepreneurs and family businesses. So really nice mix, represented the community very well. And the planning process was terrific. It gave, I think, one of the unseen bonuses when we received the award was that as things played out, that happened right before COVID exploded. And so we were all of us, I'm sure on the call, we're figuring out how to be helpful, what the next step was, how to adapt. And these resources gave us sort of a structure. Working with Matt and Ann gave us a process to kind of navigate those things and understand trends. And Matt was super helpful with his insights as they came online, that we were able to sort of embed those in the work that we're doing. Shameless plug, that translated into a digital advertising academy. One of the things that we learned is that, especially with COVID, there's more and more of an impetus to pivot to online sales. And especially in Maine, where a lot of the markets that we operate in are fairly small, the ability to use web-based platforms to reach broader markets is key. And we learned through the process that many of the entrepreneurs in Lisbon weren't very savvy in terms of digital advertising. And so using, that's one thing that worked, is we really understood the needs of the community through the focus groups and surveys and other things that Matt did. And that translated into an application for the Startup Scale Up program. So if you have entrepreneurs in your community who also could use some digital advertising skills, go to lisbonmoxie.org. And they can sign up for that digital advertising academy that's free for companies throughout the state of Maine. So check that out, lisbonmoxie.org. So
We'll include it in what we send out.
terrific. So that's kicking off later in October. The Zoom I have to join today is a special holiday session for that. So I'll be back in a minute after I get done speaking here. But so really inventorying, and I think just to be kind of honest about it, one of the things that we learned yesterday walking around Lisbon, there's an amazing stained glass business there that this guy's doing incredible work in an old church, and I wasn't aware of it, right? Liz and Matt and Ann and I walked in there and we're just blown away. And so, starting with the basic building blocks of really truly understanding who's in your community, what they're doing, how you can leverage that, can't recommend that enough. And we learned that from the case study yesterday. So the process worked really well, gave us structure, gave us a way to work through and, some of the challenges that we were faced. And I think Matt referenced that a few of the calls, folks really didn't want to leave, and they almost took on sort of a therapy session kind of situation. And a lot of these entrepreneurs, they don't interact with folks who are facing the same challenges and stresses they do. And if haven't been an entrepreneur or started a business, it's really hard to understand that. So the process was great, highly recommend it. That led to new partnerships. We have a new partnership with someone who was off the radar, but is just, primed to really add value, and that's the local Mason Lodge. And so we're working with them to transform an underutilized asset, historic building at the gateway to the community, gateway to Main Street, that's sort of falling into disrepair because the Masons don't have the membership, don't have the energy that they used to. And so we're partnering with them to use our implementation funds to transform the first floor of that building into an entrepreneur hub. A lot of potential there. And Liz Trice made the point yesterday that it's perhaps a replicable model because it's an underutilized asset and just a real natural partnership. So those are things that have worked. Some of the things that I guess haven't worked, I think probably many of you could relate to this in a community that has individual businesses with individual needs, and then sort of broader umbrella issues or opportunities that face the community. Sometimes individual needs don't sync up or don't lead to alignment across businesses on the broader issues. And so, I think that in some cases, you have to work very hard to navigate those relationships and find a common ground and so that everybody has at least a touch point where they can work together regardless of some of their individual interests on various issues. And we saw that. We closed down a portion of Main Street this year for the last two summers to sort of adapt to COVID, and well received by many, not appreciated by others. And that was sort of a contentious issue. And we're also seeing it now with this really great parcel next to the river that the town owns, and we're doing a visioning process on that. And so much of the community would like to see certain type of development, and then some of the neighbors and others in the community are reluctant and have a different vision. And so, I'm sure you all understand exactly what I'm saying in terms of navigating individual interests versus broader opportunities and figuring out a way to navigate that. And we're still working through that, obviously in Lisbon. So I hope I hit all the touch points there.
Yeah, last question, Brett. What would you tell a community that is considering or starting out doing this work? What piece of advice?
Yeah, I think really reaching out broadly, the development of the team was important. And then, again, really inventorying all the assets that you have early on. It takes a little more time. We're all busy. It's hard to carve out time to do some of that stuff. But it's really worth it because, as as practitioners, the more folks feel included, it creates a strong foundation, and then it gives you an opportunity to grow and navigate some of those broader opportunities across individual interests.
Awesome. Questions for Brett?
I have a question.
Great, Stuart.
So when you say Lisbon, there's Lisbon Falls, that's where Frank's is, right?
Yep.
It's a pretty big stretch of the whole Lisbon area.
Yeah.
Is your whole area, like your project covered like Lisbon Center and all the way?
So you just nailed one of the issues here, is that this is a community that 20 years ago was 3 separate villages and continue to see themselves in some ways as separate villages. And one in the town has seen more investment than the other. And so that's some of the tension and some of the broader opportunities that come into play. You're doing a lot down there. What about over here? So to answer your question, it's a long stretch. It's known by different names in different parts of the town, but it's all one community.
One governance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And more, I think it's becoming cohesive.
And has it always been one governance, or was that's a shift?
I don't think so. I can't speak to it generally, but there's 2 different fire companies. There historically was 2 different libraries.
Yeah.
So in some ways, 2 different mills with different sort of ethnicities that work there, right? So, yeah.
Following up on that though, Brett, would you say the Main Street we were on yesterday is becoming kind of the focal point for revitalization, economic development, entrepreneurial support systems? Is that fair to say that whole area is where that is happening, or is it happening in those other villages?
Right. So just to kind of create some context, there's Main Street, which Ann just referred to. And 5 years ago, the other end of town also had a Main Street, which is now named Village Street. And 15 years ago, Village Street was considered more dynamic.
Oh, okay.
Main Street was dead, and now that's reversed.
Okay.
And so I think, the opportunity long-term is for us to use some of the playbook that we've developed around Main Street, and we're starting to put some resources into Village Street. And, a lot of that's also in private hands. And so as a role of the municipality or a Main Street organization, figuring out how to work with private landowners and offer tools that offer a hand up is key.
Right. Okay, 3 cheers because we can clap in person for Brett. And Monson is gonna go alphabetically. And the one thing I'll say with Lisbon that is so important statewide is what Liz referenced, which is the relationship between a fraternal organization and a downtown organization is really wonderful because of that asset. I mean, we have Masonic halls and Knights of Pythias halls that they cannot afford to maintain those buildings. And the one in Lisbon, I mean, I spoke to the Masons yesterday. They're so excited to bring this new use and new life and share it with the community, but that isn't the case. But I really want to make that happen in other communities.
Go first.
Okay.
Oh,
Monson.
okay.
Whatever you want.
Okay.
Okay.
I was wondering if you're supposed to share the seat.
How close are we gonna be? We are a close community, and that's for sure. And I think that's the main thing to say when we're gonna talk about what's going on in Monson, is that we're a town of 700 people, right? And our team is all volunteers, and most of us are business owners. So that really stretches us thin, and I think we have to decide, we'll be really focused on what are we gonna do, because we don't have those resources that maybe other towns do. And on the upside of that, we think like, we're really punching above our weight class, like we're really excited about like what we've taken on and what we've accomplished, but on the other side, like, have we really bitten off more than we can chew? Like, both things are true, right? Yeah, and what we focused on this year was just like, it was important for us to have something physical. We were meeting via Zoom and meeting often, and we had a team of people who, like, we all got along, and it was a great group of people, but I think our aha was how close we became after meeting so regularly over the past 2 years, that even though we were doing it via Zoom, living in our tiny community, that I think our community is a lot stronger just for having the 10 of us. It was 10 on the team, but you know how that works, right? There ended up being maybe 6 of us who were really active the entire time and actually driving the initiatives. The 2 initiatives that we drove, one was to get an artist cottage, like a pop-up retail space. The vision being get people out of their basements with their hobbies and get them on Main Street and a chance to fail fast, or, you know, see if they had something that they wanted to grow. And then putting in a co-working space, which worked out really great we have so many people who have camps in town who are coming up for the weekends as often as they can. Can they work remotely on Friday and Monday and extend their stay? Is that the first step into them actually moving to Monson or Piscataquis County? Because we're going to need that input in new businesses and also people working remotely to grow our community. So those are the kind of focus areas that we had in place. Should I hand it over to you?
Yeah, I mean, and I can show your pictures whenever you would like. Or we can do it after you're done.
Hi, so I think the Libra Foundation came in to Monson, and they helped renovate it in 2017, and they did a lot of construction work, and so the town looks beautiful. They spent in excess of 10 million. But I think that the community itself needed to kind of to do something to help itself. And that's what the Business Association felt. And so that's why Joy and I and the others sort of moved towards this project. And it has been really great. I think that Anne Bull and Matt and Maggie have been really like wonderful at help steering us and helping us connect, I think. I would say that my aha moment, is that as the business owner of Monson Pottery, I'm in a bubble. So I throw clay on a wheel and and I watch the clay, you know, go round and round, but my business is in an environment, and I would like that environment to be healthy. too, and prosperous. And so I feel like this project is a move towards that. We had a good team. So one of our team, Tyler Adkins, is the select person, and he also runs a solar company. And he said that he felt that this project legitimized what we had already identified as issues and gave us a framework to work within. And it gave us resources. It's been a lot of work, and it is hard to balance running business and this project. I do identify as being an ecosystem builder. Now I understand what it is, and I'm proud of that. And anything else?
No, you guys are the best. Do we have questions for Monson? And I'm going to put up a couple of photographs so you can see what the artist cottage looks like.
Yeah, so the project that we did, we spent, we identified, we kind of just wanted to do small and well, and do it well. So we identified that we wanted to put an artist cottage in. And here is a photo of Precious Plastics, a recycling plastic business. So there's Melissa and her son Miller selling her wares. And there's the restaurant owner of Monson, Mary Lou, who is the owner of the Quarry restaurant in Monson.
Hold on. Well, I'm just going to this one.
Yeah, so that's our advertisement for the artist cottage.
Okay. There we go.
And then the second project that we invested in was the co-working space, which we managed to get up and running in quite a short space of time. So that's the artist cottage in downtown.
No, that's Johnson Hall. Sorry, people. I thought we had one more slide, or do we? Oh, there it is. One more.
Oh, maybe we don't have a photo of the artist project, the co-working. Oh, the co-working space. Yeah.
There you go.
So the co-working space, yeah, we've got up and running, and we've already had people working in it, and we know we need to do more with the marketing of it. It's actually just behind the artist cottage. It's in a room that was formerly being lit by the town office for us.
I actually was able to use on Monday and gave a presentation, a webinar to the state of Washington. From Monson.
Yeah, that was a great moment. So any questions?
Questions for Monson? Lots of takeaways from Monson for me. Like the power of the all volunteer organization is really amazing. And I also think from our tour, I was really blown away by the potential for outdoor recreation, economic development, and how that will potentially complement Monson Arts and all of Libra's investment. And that really, that's driven by a lot of the landowners, the select persons. Like it's really cool to think about, and it's going to connect, which is what I love, to other parts of Maine and make a trail system. So the vision for that is really incredible. So
share one quick.
Yeah,
thing, if
please.
it's okay, because it was sort of an aha moment for me working with Monson is that, you know, we were talking ecosystem building, but just like in Main Street in the 4 Points, we needed an organization component to this, because to Gemma and Joy's, you know, acknowledgement here, they had done a great job of identifying certain projects, and, you know, we inventoried things, and they had done previous work. Their struggle though was like how to prioritize, how to structure themselves. And I think we spent probably 3 or 4 other meetings outside like ecosystem, though, just having that discussion. And so I think, you know, especially in a rural context, I think that's an important component that we need to kind of work into ecosystem building. is spending some upfront time and what's the structure, what's the kind of like the vehicle to move this forward
Good
and
point.
engage individuals and help to prioritize and structure when you don't have an abundance of resources and capacity. So that was a big learning. I'm glad we're still getting there, but I think that's the pathway that needs to be sort of injected into this
It's
process.
a very good point, and that's really helpful for Joyce in Ohio.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions?
Well, just a comment that it makes me so happy to hear, Gemma, to hear you say that you do think of yourself as an ecosystem builder. I think that's so important. And that's
Yeah.
part of, you know, what we set out to do at the beginning of this program, to have more people in more places identify with that role. And it just is so important for everybody to know that you can do ecosystem building in a community that is the gateway to the 100-mile wilderness and has a population of 700 people. It just, I think, is a good learning, both for our ecosystem in Maine, but also for lots of other places across the country.
Absolutely. It's been inspirational for sure. Christina Skowehgan, you want to come up?
Sure.
Okay. I'm gonna take my coffee. I'm gonna step over here.
This owl thing is pretty cool.
Yeah, we all want one. All right, so hi everyone. Main Street Skowehgan was excited to be selected as one of the 3 pilot communities in Maine 18 months ago. And for those of you who may not be aware, we're one of the 10 accredited Main Street communities in the state. And we've been in business, if you will, since 2005. And I took over about 6 years ago. And I think that one of the things that some of my colleagues would say on Zoom here about Main Street communities is that sometimes we get known for being organizations that just plan events. And that's not something that I wanted to be known for necessarily, even though we do host, in my opinion, the best craft brew fest in the entire state. However, we are more than that. And thinking about you know, moving forward with this ecosystems work, I think it's really given us a lot of direction in the points, the 4th point of economic vitality that is one of the you know, part of the Main Street approach. And so it's really exciting for me as we think about moving forward and really digging our feet in and our hands in this work. So we took Matt's report back in January and sat down as our team. And I'll tell you, our team is made up of myself and the town manager. We have representatives from the chamber, from the hospital, large businesses, small businesses, the school, including the Career and Technical Center and adult ed. And am I missing anyone? Our Economic Development Council or Corporation. So we sat down and said, okay, where do we want to focus? And so we came up with these 4 strategies, kind of taking what Matt had given us for 10 recommendations and said, okay, so we need to focus on cultivating local entrepreneurs. And so I'll get to how we're doing that in a second. The second one was connecting them to resources, because it was obvious that our business owners through the survey didn't know what resources were available to them, even though in Skowehgan we actually have a ton of resources. We wanted to focus on 2 niche clusters. And so that was our 3rd strategy, figuring out how to better promote and think about moving forward in the local food sector and the outdoor recreation sector and sharing opportunities for businesses in those 2 realms. And then we wanted to continue the work that Main Streets are really kind of known for in this, like building the economic foundation, placemaking, et cetera. So those are the 4 strategies that we figured out and decided to move forward with. And so the first strategy, cultivating entrepreneurs, is really where we've done a lot of work over the summer. We were very excited and pleased to have 2 Main Street fellows who joined us in February to actually do a lot of this work on the ground. We decided as a team that we needed to start with going back to our businesses and saying, okay, so we heard that you have, you know, these needs, but really what things can we do to help you and better support you? So we actually conducted a business needs assessment, and we tried to reach as many of our businesses as possible. We contacted all of them in some fashion, and we talked to 135, I think the total number was. And just recently, we have a final report that shares all the information and the learnings from this needs assessment, which is what Patrick, our new business relations manager, who's on the Zoom with us today, we'll be using as kind of in addition to these strategies in our implementation plan, he'll be taking that business needs assessment and saying, okay, how do we tweak the plan going forward and how do we implement? So that was a really great learning opportunity for us. What also came out of that was the obvious need for us to spend more time talking and listening to business owners and providing them opportunities to tell us what they need for support. And so the aha moment for us as a board was when our business owners kept saying to us, you know, one of my board chair was like, I keep hearing from businesses that they feel so great to be listened to. And you know, I'm an office of one currently until Patrick starts with a couple of AmeriCorps members, and I don't always have time to go and you know, listen to every business owner in town. And but it was clearly a need and clearly a part of this work that we had not been doing well. So that was where we said, okay, we need to commit. And so we put out a job description, and we are excited to welcome Patrick to the team because he is going to be leading this ecosystem building effort and really be our contact for local businesses. And then doing some of the other stuff that I'm going to talk about in a second. But so yay, Patrick, so excited. But it was a great aha moment and learning opportunity for us. And it's really going to give us, I think, a jump start into this economic vitality work that we've needed for the last several years. So along with the cultivating entrepreneur, under that strategy, we did the needs assessment, and we are figuring out some training and education opportunities across the life cycle of businesses. So what does that mean from a startup perspective, but also what does it mean for businesses who are looking to grow, or a succession planning also, which is a need in Skowhegan. We are partnering and have been in partnership with Waterville's Dirigo Lab. So Garvin's on the call right now or on Zoom, and we're excited to be partnered. We are going to be a spoke of the regional accelerator program that he talked about. And so, you know, thinking about how that Skowhegan, that can be part of the Skowhegan fabric also. And so thinking about our two niche sectors, local food and outdoor rec, and how we're going to capitalize on those as part of this accelerator partnership. And then we actually have decided that we're going to lease a space in downtown Skowhegan and have our own innovation hub, if you will, still named TBD. But we had a workshop on Monday or Tuesday morning rather, which brought community members in to tell us what they were interested in as part of this hub and how we should design it. So we're really excited about that. And Patrick's going to be running that. So yay to have another person on board for that. We're meeting regularly with all of our economic development and economic folks in the region. And so we meet about monthly and we discuss some of the challenges and opportunities for our business owners. And Patrick's going to be doing a better job than I have been in compiling and promoting those resources. Our niche clusters, we conducted an industry market analysis to identify opportunities in both local food and outdoor rec, and not just, you know, from like a restaurant or retail perspective, but in, you know, actual legit industry type things that where it could be manufacturing and other things that are perhaps a little bit more intriguing to people as they look to start a business versus wanting to start a restaurant, for instance. So thinking about different opportunities in those two sectors. And then we're continuing to build the foundation. But one of the things specific to the report that Matt put together was that we have a bunch of historic buildings in our downtown that are ripe for development. And in fact, our code enforcement officer would tell you that a bunch of them are crumbling right now and need some work. And so we are in the process, and I'm waiting for the report probably within the next few weeks, a real estate barriers analysis to figure out what are the barriers to redevelopment of some of these historic buildings, and what are some of the creative opportunities that will give some of our property owners the ability to go out and actually redevelop their, you know, building that they may not have known about. And then our plan is to utilize some of the grant funds that we have available to actually pay a developer to help a local property owner redevelop their space. So more to come on that, but we figured we needed a case study to share instead of just saying, here's what you can do. We need to actually show it. So a lot of stuff happening.
And we're continuing our work, in the outdoor recreation sector. We have an outdoor rec program that we've been running for a couple of years, which has been highly successful and growing. And then, of course, our river project, as Matt had mentioned, focusing on placemaking and one of the new things that we're going to be one of the new projects for the coming year is actually a downtown design master plan, which is all part of this building the foundation, thinking about connectivity, traffic, parking, bike ped infrastructure in our downtown and bringing people together to be proactive instead of reactive as we look to the future for Skowhegan. So,
what would you tell another community starting out after your experience with the process?
I think that it's super important to just listen. That was, I think, the big aha moment for us. I spent a lot of time and a lot of hours working and trying to figure out what's best for the community. And, we went through a listening process back when it first started as part of the strategic plan. And then since then, we've been in full on implementation mode. And sometimes I think dialing it back and just being there to listen is the way you build relationships. So
great. Questions?
Yeah. You mentioned this, the Virgo group from Waterville. Could you talk more about that?
Hey, Garvin, can I put you on the spot?
There he comes.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you for the question. And other than, of course, wanting to work with the amazing team and Christina and the great work that Skowhegan is doing, Dirigo Labs is a regional technology accelerated program, one of the newer ones in the state of Maine. It is new. It's going to be launching it's effectively launched already and really represents a vertical integration of a lot of the Central Maine Growth Council's existing work, operations, and kind of our milieu of economic development services. The Growth Council being a 501c6 public-private mission-driven economic development corporation, thinking strongly about regionalism and understanding that our economy doesn't stop or start at a municipal boundary. Dirigo Labs was a project that we put in for federal funding, and with linchpin support from US EDA's Built to Scale program, which actually they just announced momentarily the 2021 recipients, including a Maine company, GMRI, which is spectacular to support the blue economy. That was leveraged with a Range 4 ecosystem grant from MTI, some supporting contributions from Colby College and some other resource partners to facilitate an accelerator. So if you think about the fluidity from co-working to incubations or incubators and accelerators, we're going to look to launch pad those more maturing startups in the mid-Maine area. Just really quickly, 4 key legs of the stool, if you will. Physical infrastructure or hardware in terms of a facility located downtown with integration with a co-working space and regional spokes to account for our dispersion and rural nature. And that's where Christina and the Skowhegan team lives, as we'll layer in our initiatives and programming and think non-parochial about how we can partner. Number 2, a network of both current and future leaders and those entrepreneurs. Number 3, standing up an angel investment arm, so investment capital to think about how we seed and launch startups and entrepreneurs. And number 4, really leaning into our rich legacy and endearing assets in terms of our academic and collegial milieu with the colleges in the area, particularly KVCC, Thomas College, and Colby College, amongst others, to provide both direct and indirect cohort education, pipeline development, and support when it comes to workforce development for area businesses. So to account for what we're doing in a very rural setting, we're looking to do a hub and spoke model with spokes into the region where we can layer kind of resources, whether it's a speaker, an entrepreneur, or entrepreneurship network, or say, for example, partner on a deal or investment capital opportunities, that is.
Great. Thanks.
Anne, do you mind if I just jump in for a sec?
Please jump in.
So I can tell Martha has her hand raised, and I just, before we go to Martha, I wanted to ask you, Christina, if you could talk just a little bit about the roles that emerged for your chamber, the economic development organizations, and your Main Street organization as you went through that process with Matt, because I think obviously that's always an interesting issue for Main Street organizations, which what's the relationship with those other entities and how do you divide up the work?
Great question, Maggie. And hopefully I'll answer it adequately, but it's, as you noted, always an area of interest for people as we have a number of economic development entities and communities. And in Skowhegan, we have, I almost feel like we have more than the normal community. We have a Main Street program, a chamber, a town economic development office through the municipality. We also have an economic development corporation in Skowhegan, but also our regional economic development corporation for the county is stationed in Skowhegan, and we work together quite a bit. And then we've got KV-COG. So it's kind of, it's an interesting relationship that we all have. And in that, first of all, we all know that there's a bunch of work that needs to be done. And so there's plenty to be done. And so doing duplicative efforts doesn't make any sense for anyone. So we've all tried to kind of figure out our place in the world. And so as we went through this process and we looked at the chart that Matt brought up earlier, we did a lot of thinking about, you know, who does what and really who's better at what. So my organization, Main Street, we do technical assistance grants in the amount of like, you know, $500 to $1,500, but we don't have a revolving loan fund for it, for instance. And that is definitely way more suited for an economic development corporation or a municipality. So, you know, we recognize that we all have strengths and weaknesses. And so we sitting down together in a room and kind of figuring that out, and also thinking about the future of Skowhegan and Skowhegan's needs and our business needs really helped us kind of shape the direction of those things. And, you know, the chamber is an advocate and 501c6, we're a 501c3, so their role in advocacy is far more important, or, you know, we don't even have the ability to do that. So it's thinking about how our organizations are set up. And, you know, another thing that I always like to, my poor town manager, I'm like, oh, you have all these processes and, you know, ordinances and things, and I don't have those issues. So thinking about how we can all utilize our strengths and weaknesses to really work together to do all this great community development work was really an important thing.
Go ahead, Martha. Thanks, Christina.
Actually, I think I had sort of a similar question, Christina, but similar but not exact. So you talked about the sort of reputation of Main Street programs as being sort of just events, and, you know, the changes that are happening within sort of the Main Street programs as you become more responsive to the pieces in the community. So I just wondered if you could talk a little bit, you know, to sort of that Main Street audience around how you sort of move public perception beyond that, because that's, you know, certainly in lots of the places that I work, you know, I'll hear people go, oh yeah, don't they, you know, they're just that events group. And so sort of how can we help people understand that these programs are sort of much more dynamic than just that?
So I think there's a number of factors that go into this, and it's not necessarily just related to this work, but starting, you know, back when I first started at Main Street Skowhegan, we had a grant from the Maine Community Foundation to actually do a strategic planning process. And the plan was to do a plan for the organization and our strategies for, you know, moving forward, but we decided it would be better suited to actually do a plan for the community. So that way we were able to engage our community members in the work that we were doing, and then figure out a strategy, you know, several strategies and different objectives for the community moving forward that we could all, and the collective all being Main Street, the chamber, the town, economic development corporations, et cetera, all could work together, KV-CAP, Somerset Public Health, could work together to implement. And so that strategic plan was actually, I think, a big turning point for the organization in that we talked to about 500 people in our community. We were able to get a lot of feedback. We brought in our strategic planning team was a cross section of the community. So it wasn't just Main Street folks, it was people from our, businesses and our other organizations in the town. And we had a selectman on board. And so that was, I think, a great way of starting out this new way of thinking about Main Street, but also thinking about all the organizations as we work together to achieve success for the future of Skowhegan. And so since then, we've been in we think it's very important for us to actually be at select board meetings regularly. I regularly present about what we're doing, but also providing data and accurate data about some of the stuff that we're doing. I can go in and say, we've talked to X number of businesses and here's what they've said as part of this needs assessment that we just did. I can report on things like, and this is not a great example, but it's one that comes off the top of my head right now because it's fresh in my mind. We just brought in 1,100 people for the Skowhegan Craft Brew Fest, which is not really about planning a festival, but about bringing people to our community that are going to spend money, that stay in the local motel, which was full that weekend, by the way. Yay. And regularly we have 30% of those ticket sales are from out-of-state folks. And so that's kind of a big deal as you think about business development and moving Skowhegan forward. So being able to communicate what we're doing and having specific examples of things that we're working on, I think is really important moving forward. So I might have gotten off, hopefully that helped answer your question, but.
I have something to add to that. That issue, Martha, is a really big issue. And I think that National is doing a really good job of trying to elevate Main Streets to being contributing members of economic development professionals. I have seen that over the years I've been involved, and that's important. But I do think it's really important in our state to also be perceived that way. And Joanna, who's on the call, and I are working on our 2022 planning. And one of the things that we recognize is really needed from the downtown center is better communication to show the value of the Main Streets and what they're doing, and the impact of that, by providing data, by providing strategic direction. And so we are very concerned about that as well. So I don't have the answer, or I'm not going to be able to say I'm doing it, but it is top of mind.
The other thing I'll just note really quickly, because this is a world that I am really excited about, not to downplay the importance of, design work in, street pole flags and banners and making your downtown look beautiful. But I really think it's important to elevate as a Main Street organization to here, where you're okay, big picture, 10 years from now, where do we want to be and what are the projects that are going to put us there? And so thinking big picture and then being able to actually pull together a strategy for implementation in this big picture world, I think is going to move the Main Streets forward in a way that perhaps flower pots and flags would not have done previously. Which is daunting sometimes.
Yes, it is.
But really exciting also.
Yeah.
I would offer just one of the things. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You keep on, go ahead.
How about you, Martha? Then we'll go to Stu.
I was just going to offer one of the things that sort of from my vantage point that I see in interacting with the Main Street programs is the more holistic view that you take around sort of all of the pieces needing to fit together piece. And I think that's a real competitive advantage that you all have as organizations, is that, you're not just looking at businesses, you're not just looking at housing, you're not just looking at beautification, but you really are looking at how it all fits together. And I think that's a real competitive advantage for this group.
Thank you. Will you help me develop our communication strategy?
You had talked about doing a case study for redevelopment, historic property. I was just wondering how many historic buildings are there in Skowhegan? How many? if you're doing a case study, it must mean that there's more, a number that can be redeveloped or renovated.
There are a number. I honestly don't know off the top of my head how many buildings are in our downtown historic district. We do have what they call the Flatiron District, so that's basically right in the hub of our downtown around the Rotary. I don't even want to estimate a guess, but we have a number of them that are, the second floors are not utilized. In fact, I would say 2/3 of the second and third floors in our downtown are not utilized. And so that's a huge problem because housing was identified as one of the major issues in Skowhegan from an ecosystems perspective as being missing. And, we're poor people, there are these awesome people, they move to Skowhegan and they can't find a place to live, so they decide to go elsewhere when we could have them living in our downtown, walking to our businesses, spending money locally, but instead they choose to move out of town because there's no place to live because our housing stock is pretty poor.
So building code issues would be the like second and third floor use, right? They just don't have
Well,
current codes.
I think it's code, I
It's
think
a
it's
whole bunch of things.
It's
I think.
return
Yeah.
on investment.
Mhm.
It's such, these buildings that are in Skowhegan and every one of our other main streets, you're not gonna get a return on investment in 5 years. You really have to take the long view. You need a different kind of investor. And it's something we are trying to crack the code of, because it is these wonderful buildings that have this amazing opportunity.
Yeah.
And we're not the only ones. This is a national issue, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we have a building in downtown that was redeveloped by the Economic Development Corporation that has an elevator that goes up to the second floor. And it stretches across a couple of buildings. They actually made it that way on purpose. So that way other buildings could redevelop and you still haven't seen redevelopment.
Which
as
is
part of it.
crazy, because that's a model that we
Yeah,
always
it's really
want to
good.
work.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Thank you.
Other questions for any of our pilots? Thanks, Christina. Let's see, Joanna says, have any of the teams encountered opposition to this work? And if so, how have you responded? So that's for all three of you. Any opposition in Lisbon? You've had some because you were closing the street and trying to make space for entrepreneurs, right?
That's correct, yeah, so, and that was sort of tangential to this, combined with this effort, but, it got sort of bundled in. So actually, we had somebody pop in, to the open house yesterday and a local person and said, hey, I've been following what's happening on Main Street and the Rummel Mill side and this whole hub, and I'm just curious what's going on. So I think really, Lisbon's, a growing community. There's a lot of change happening very fast. And so some of the things that we've done have actually opened up an opportunity to have a really good conversation. So I think opposition is one way to phrase it, but it's really an opportunity to engage new people who haven't been engaged yet.
And to get to some of those issues that may have been around for a long time.
Right.
Anything in Monson or Skowhegan to answer that question?
Opposition to the CEP project?
Yeah.
No, I think Joy and I have done quite a good job at bringing the community along with us.
Great.
No, we haven't seen any opposition. I think more so from our business owners is confusion around the technology. And so our communication about what the work that we're doing needs to get more fluid. And so I'm hoping, and as Matt noted the other day, thinking about how we're going to support our businesses is really the simple way of describing it. But using the term entrepreneurial ecosystem is just too much.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Too academic.
It's a lot. Great. Anything else, Maggie, on this section from your perspective?
I don't think so. That was great.
And just a quick
Yeah,
resource.
sorry.
No, just a resource, because Christina alluded to it, but they put together this great, I know she doesn't probably think it's like all finished, but this great tactical plan she alluded to about the 4 primary recommendations. They sort of broke it down into tactics. She was kind enough to allow us to post it at the mainstreet.org in our entrepreneurial resources section. So it should be up in the next day or so, but it's another good resource to see kind of like, here's the process, but then here's how you can break it down into sort of the tactical implementation aspects of the ecosystem. So
that's a good point.
It's a really good doc, and so it'll be up as well.
Great.
And just while I think we have 5 minutes before we really transition, and there are a number of other communities here. I mean, obviously Waterville and Machias and Rockland and
Bolton, Gardner.
So I wonder,
Yes.
you know, if any of those communities are doing pieces of this work, want to share quick highlights, or just an opportunity for additional sharing.
Great. Denise, you want to share anything from down east?
Sure. I just wanted to also say congratulations to these teams and thank you for sharing so openly. I've taken pages of notes, so I'm very
great.
We don't have a center yet on Main Street. It's very close. The project is funded, but ahead of the physical space, we've been doing a lot virtually, mostly thanks to our partner network, as well as funding from the Community Foundation and others. And we've really been able to tap into the local small business community, as well as regionally and even across the state. And we've learned a lot, and what everyone has said about collaboration and listening, we have found could not be truer. And focusing on building with, not for, is huge. And we've seen success because of that, and have a lot of lessons learned, and are inventorying and identifying resources all the time, and helping refer folks, you know, whatever their given need is for their business or individually. So hearing about your great resources as well, I'm thinking of connections that I may be sending your way, of small business owners who have been in some of our programs. So again, thank you.
Great. So yeah, downtown Machias is where that innovation center is going to eventually open. And I know you've been really generous in offering your programming to our pilots and their entrepreneurs. Because Gemma, didn't you participate in?
Yeah, hi Denise.
Good to see you.
We're doing a meeting next week as well, right?
That's right. Yes, through the DEIN Down East Innovation Network.
Yeah, so I've taken advantage of the entrepreneurial program that Denise has offered, and it's taught me a lot.
Great. Great. Any other communities want to share where you are in this work, what you're thinking, as Maggie suggested?
I can quickly share. We are launching a part of Rockland Downtown, which is kind of like our community hub that we created to try and act as like a landing place for people to create meetups, whether or not it's to talk about business ideas or just like startup things that they're working on, and trying to figure out how to work with some of our co-working spaces to create some programming around the ideas that are coming out of there. Again, like on the really early stages, and like I mentioned earlier on in the meeting, like we're trying to understand how much we should be guiding this versus letting it happen, but we're trying to understand the density of people solving these problems in our community and try and facilitate meetups at a time when it's hard to do so. So that's where, and then we're also looking at there's a business owner that's trying to launch another kind of less co-working space and more just like third space for people to come and do this in the center of a downtown. So that's kind of what's going on in Rockland.
That's great, Dave. Thanks. Deb, were you going to share something? No. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Great.
Was there in here in the room? Did you want to say?
Did I miss anybody?
I'm
sorry, Cara.
That's all right. I can talk a little bit about what Ellsworth has done sort of prior to even understanding this. We last year in 2020 worked with Machias Savings Bank to launch our downtown grants program, which was pretty successful. And now in its second year, we've doubled, almost tripled the amount of money that we raised from local banks, and actually got a consortium of 5 local banks to actually throw in on it rather than just Machias Savings Bank on its own. We were pretty successful with that and really excited because we're trying to get the entrepreneurs to understand the difference between national banks that exist in our town versus community banks that give money back to their local community. So we feel really excited this year to launch that program with $11,000 to give to our downtown businesses. And then also, as a result of the pandemic, right away within like the first or second month, we launched our Zoom at noon meetings, which happened once a month and just kind of brought everyone onto a call to sort of talk about issues that were facing the community. Sometimes we would have presenters that would come in, but most of the time it ended up being a platform for the business owners to begin to sort of just talk about issues they were facing. And we even found that some of our municipal leaders actually started to tune in. And it was the first time ever that businesses had maybe met the person right next to them or had been able to have a direct platform to speak with the business owners. And it was nice because it made us as the middleman, not the person that was reporting back to municipality or even hired local officials, but it was the business owners having that direct opportunity. So
that's great.
And then this year we also did a Bricks and Clicks program, which we stole from another downtown organization in Virginia. And we received funding from the Maine Community Foundation to launch that. And we just commenced that first year program. And it was very successful again in creating connections between new community leaders as well as small businesses and giving them resources that they would never have had opportunity to use before. So
awesome. And Cara's a part-time director of an affiliate. It's crazy how much you get done.
now.
3/4, yeah, great.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Okay. I guess we're gonna transition. Maggie, you wanna do the transition? Because I feel like I can't find my agenda.
Monson.
Yeah, you saw Monson.
Sorry, I was still muted when I was pulling up the agenda document. So so we wanted to just make some time for about 45 minutes or so to talk about other issues related to everything we've heard today. And we talked about breaking up into small groups and bringing ideas back, but we thought given the size of our group and the hybrid nature of this meeting that this might be easier to do as a large group. And Anne, I might need a little bit of help just understanding what these bullets.
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna find that. I got it.
Okay.
So everybody is gonna have to get their fingers working because we are gonna engage the chat for those of you online. And those of you in the room just get to shout. So we have 4 topics and we will devote like 10 minutes to each topic. All right, hold on, Maggie. Concerns about this work, how to better engage the underserved in your communities in this work, who and what do you need, which is obviously very specific to your community, but that's okay. And I don't remember the 4th one, local startups and place-based entrepreneurs.
Are we gonna go back to the vision one? The short vision and the large vision.
Are we going back to the vision? Yeah, maybe that is what that is. Do you remember, Maggie? Sorry, everybody.
Is
total brain.
Is this about alignment, sort of the intersection we talked about?
Yes.
Like between high intensity or locally based?
Yes, that is
place-based
what it is.
entrepreneurship?
Thank you, Matt,
Yeah.
for remembering what that topic was. And Jenna, you were saying, go back to.
Well, earlier there was a question about the vision, like having a small vision versus like a large vision.
Right.
And like the issues with that. Did we answer that one?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think. I was trying to remember the context of the small vision, big vision discussion. Was it specific to Monson?
No.
No.
No, it's just a question that Liz had put in the chat and we asked Matt to comment on it, but that issue of the types of businesses that we're supporting locally and whether they are generally, serving a local market and it's a small business and it remains a small business, or if we have some good stories about things that launched locally that maybe turned into bigger businesses reaching larger markets and growth. So we've heard a couple of examples of these today, Maine Grains and Blue Ox in Lisbon. And so there may be others, and we would love to collect some of those stories and just understand some of the supports that we provide locally that support both types of people.
Selling to one of the biggest, like.
Yes,
furniture
we have another
manufacturers
example.
In California.
Right,
But here,
John
yeah,
Weinhardt.
I think John is a great example, but in Monson, but also it falls into the same side of like all of the businesses in Monson that like, we're putting all this work into growing them, but they're all where they want to be. They're all maxed
Exactly.
out. Like there's a quality of life piece that everybody's trying to fit in to their small or their business, and they don't want to grow.
That's right.
So
That's why it's an individual,
Yeah.
He could scale that as much
yes,
as he wanted to, but it's a personal decision.
Yes.
That's okay, support them where they're at, and where they
Well,
wanna be.
He has a problem motivating labor is.
Yes, he mentioned labor issues,
Yes,
yeah.
there can be barriers, right?
right, and I mean, we'll just speak about labor because I'm sure it's of interest to everybody on the call, but Matt, I just thought it was interesting because I heard two stories when you were visiting from Mary Lou, who has the quarry, and also from Kim, who has the barbecue. So these are two restaurants.
Yeah.
Who have specifically changed their business model.
Right.
So they do not have to have employees.
Right.
They have changed their menus. They have changed how they run their business. They've changed their hours.
Yeah.
And they're doing this forever now, right? This is.
They changed
So
their supply chain.
Yes, so they do not have to ever worry about the stress of the employee
Yeah,
situation.
it's crazy.
But it, right?
But it's
They could
working.
have been bigger, they could grow more, they could have a very different business model if they had labor, but they don't. They're
No,
very
it's-
clever in the way they've done it, but.
Right. Very
So
true.
I think one of the things that we can think about in this is, especially in a place like Monson, that's a great example where you are now really understanding who's there in your community and what their needs are, and are understanding they're all kind of at this stage, like this is where they want to be and they don't need to be scaling and turning it into something else. So how do you as an ecosystem be prepared when you do have somebody moving in or somebody in your community who has a big innovation driven vision and a business that they want to start that's going to be different than the ones you're supporting now? I think, and that may be sort of a universal question for all of us, like how do we be ready for things that we don't currently have?
Yeah, I wonder if that question, since we're talking about scale, I think in the past, this is just my own reflection, is like scale's been about growing to provide, more jobs. I mean, let's face it, economic development's largely been about matrix and metrics around job creation. And I think what you find in how the economy is changing is that should not scale be really about sort of wealth creation, that jobs that are created pay well. It doesn't have to be about the number of jobs, that the people that are launching these businesses can be in the place that they want to and have an income that allows them to be there. Like, it's sort of like, that's the equation. And so they scale to that point that allows them to do that, but it's not necessarily about the old economic development model of let's scale businesses to provide hundreds of new jobs, because who's gonna work at them?
Right.
I mean, that's not really the problem. So I don't know, it's just thought.
Liz says, I'm intrigued that the businesses that reached maturity never used family credit cards or grants to get started. Is it true that small and medium businesses start with small vision and stay small versus innovation-driven businesses starting with big visions? Or are there good stories of people starting small and growing big?
Yeah, so I think that's the issue that we've been addressing.
Yep. Okay.
What's big?
So true.
So should we go through these four?
Sure.
pieces and just, I'll try to take notes on what comes
Yep,
up.
and we'll be able to save the chat, of course. Maggie.
Okay, great.
Concerns. What is, what are concerns about this work in your region, in your downtown existing programs? People that aren't working on this yet, what are your concerns? Throw them in the chat, shout them out. No matter what stage you're at.
I just want to read out Joyce's from the chat that Main Street tends to focus on retail and has limited definition of business. Talk about some other business approaches. I think it's nice that Kara is here because that's sort of thrown in stark relief in a place like Ellsworth, where you have a very active Main Street and also the Center for Union River Center for Innovation right around the corner that is, serving as an incubator for some innovation-driven businesses in the community.
I think we're also seeing a return of manufacturing to main streets. I mean, it's at a different scale.
Absolutely.
But Maine Grain's perfectly good example. John's business could be right in the heart. And artisans, makers are finding that main streets are a great place because you can have a retail brand component, but the spaces that we have along main streets allow for production and then distribution fulfillment out the backside. And so, it's not traditional manufacturing, but it's certainly production, and the barriers to entry are so low. Equipment costs are down, there's equipment's at scale, logistic costs are down, well, I should say pre-COVID.
Yeah.
But you get the point that, and the consumer experience is all about lifestyle brands, which are about narrowness, it's about speaking a story. And so that's where the consumers are going. So you can be small, and that's what people are looking for, and be in manufacturing. So I think that's a great opportunity for main streets.
Yeah, and the story part, like of being able to see the maker, buy the product, whatever.
Yeah, there's value there.
I have a question about relating to that. We just had one of our largest buildings in downtown sell to a manufacturing company that manufactures aloe vera supplements and things like that. When they first came in, the building, the downstairs floor had a coffee shop in it. It still does for the moment, but it's leaving. We had a couple of other little retail businesses. What happened was after a year of that building being there with this new business, because of COVID, they exploded. They're now trying to bring all of their manufacturing here from a Texas facility.
Wow.
And what they've done is they've pushed out all of the businesses that are in there. However, the businesses have found other places on Main Street. So it's been a good, but an up and down sort of thing. What I have heard as a director in downtown, we've had a lot of community folks be not so excited about manufacturing being in our downtown, whether it be the brewery that's off Main Street or it be this prominent building that's a historic building on Main Street. How do you deal with that intersection, and how do you get the community members that may not be business owners but are very valuable to Main Streets, obviously? How do you get them to how do you start to have that conversation around sort of their Main Street changing, the face of things starting to look different?
I have lots of ideas.
I think that's all that's been with us for so long, because you have this kind of historic element where people want to think about main streets based on a 1950s concept of the J.C. Penney's and the Sears store, Woolworths store, and we've been under change every decade since that time, whether it's been new competition from Walmart, mail order to Amazon. And I think that the hallmarks still remain, however, that main streets have been one for everyone, that main streets are about diversity of activity.
Yeah.
So places of civic engagement, to parks, to retail, to service, and to manufacturing. And each one of those has changed and evolved over time, but those sort of uses and functions remain. And then on the production side, the small scale production, I think we have to think of it as there's progression there, that you can have like pop-up manufacturing, small scale production, just like in Maine grains, where it's in some smaller pieces, like the creamer's in a pretty small place, the pizza dough is in a pretty small, and then there's progression, and at some point, they may need an industrial park or something like that for their production or brewing or whatever it is. And so that's where you can really talk legitimately about this holistic economic development
Right.
within
That's
that
where I was
particular
going.
sector, and it sort of migrates as it grows and scales. So.
Yeah, and I was just gonna add, I think there's the academic answer, which is you want diverse economic activity in your downtowns, right? And you can document that and plan for it, and then I also think the piece we were just talking about, the experiential nature of a manufacturer on Main Street can be a really great opportunity to add to the mix. Do any of the Main Street directors want to add to that? Any small scale manufacturing in Belfast Act? Or we talked about Maine grains.
We do. We have kind of going on sort of this fiber arts culture, where we have one business who started sort of a makerspace. It's a for-profit model, but they're utilizing the fiber industry. One of the challenges we're seeing, and we worked with the city to do a market study, is that we are kind of for a lack of space. And one of the areas that we've identified for future growth is this light and medium industrial manufacturing. Some of our larger industrial spaces become more desirable just outside of the city, where some of our, for example, we have a coffee business who is roasting right here in Belfast, and he is being displaced by a recreational marijuana grower who wants to come in and buy the building. And there's literally nowhere else because he's coffee roasting and it's noise and smell. It's really tough to find a space. So we're trying to figure out a way to kind of spur some of that sort of development for those sorts of businesses.
That's great. That's important planning.
One of the options you may look at, it sort of follows the playbook in Lisbon and what we were discussing earlier about underutilized assets. We had a project out in Laramie, Wyoming, where we started to explore underutilized manufacturing assets. Because, again, with the scale of manufacturing changing, there may be equipment or space. In Carbondale, Illinois, there's a like cabinet flooring maker that has opened up some of their space to some artists and things like that needed the equipment in the space because they just had it. And so they're kind of like cohabitating in manufacturing space is another way to just leverage underutilized assets. So it's taking concepts of like night markets or night kitchens and those kinds of things to Masonic lodges, churches, church kitchens, educational institutions. It's about leveraging assets that you have that are often, again, pretty underutilized in most places.
And I think that speaks to what Brett said, which is out of the gate, he was reflecting that maybe early on asset identification and 24-hour asset identification, right? Like what could be used for another purpose or another time of day is really important in the process. Let's see. Other challenges of recreational marijuana industry. Wait a minute, I'm trying to read Martha's comment.
Yeah, so there's a few things in here. There's, if you go back a little bit, David mentioned a concern around just finding the right language to inspire action versus losing folks with some of the insider language that we use. We talked about ecosystem building as a difficult term. And Joyce mentioned people wanting more parking. And then Martha was asking about the challenges or opportunities, I think is what that other means in terms of recreational marijuana industry within the communities themselves.
Yeah, is Melissa still on? Do you want to talk about the challenge in Gardner with recreational marijuana right now?
Yeah, so Gardner suffered pretty.
Gardner.
Yeah, we
Sorry.
suffered up to 11 businesses closed almost instantly. Well, not instantly, with the next few months of COVID hitting. That coincided perfectly with recreational marijuana industry opening up. And we have 6 facilities between recreational and medicinal within our downtown district. So some are still slowly opening. The process of doing it has been a lot more laborious than they had expected, but we do have at least 4 or so up and going right now. There was a lot of opposition in the community. There is a youth coalition that sort of formed and engaged with the city so that they could reassess how this is permitted. And so now there are some new regulations so that they need to be a certain distance from each other. And before it was pretty loose. I think the city council did not expect so many vacancies. And so it was just perfect timing for everyone. They are open now. I don't know, I'm not seeing much activity, both positive or negative in them right now. And I think that a lot of people are just sort of waiting for them all to weed themselves out and figure out who's going to be the best in a year or two.
No pun intended.
Yeah. Wasn't even thinking.
That's a lot in your relatively small Main Street
I
district.
realized it was so many.
It is, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's a
Well, and we
lot.
did hear in one of our Down East Innovation Network meetings from our colleague in Farmington, who also has a really visible entrepreneurial space and soon to be maker space on the Main Street in Farmington, that the opening of the recreational marijuana businesses there and the grow operations has particularly put a strain on workforce needs because they're paying higher hourly rates, and it's been difficult to recruit folks for the other businesses in the community.
I've heard that as well.
Wow, there you go, Martha.
Yep.
Reality from Main Street.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that we're hearing, just sort of in terms of businesses needing to expand, sort of that underutilized manufacturing and warehouse space is just, there's nothing because it's all being used for growing and processing.
We have heard that too. Yeah. Okay, other concerns?
If it's okay, and given our time, do we want to move from concerns to talking about some of our underserved entrepreneurs
definitely.
and the who or what do we need?
Great. Yeah, and you remember Matt had a slide about diversity and the need for diversity in this work, and a lot of underserved populations possibly in his list. So I think the question is who and how to get them at the table, and or what are you doing that's innovative in your downtown for some of these conversations? Any good examples in this area? Thanks, Mia, for coming. Maybe she already left. Anyone of the pilots able to include people that normally don't come engage in community planning conversations that you, and if so, how'd you get them there? Anything in particular?
I think Gemma and I do this mostly through our businesses
Yeah.
because people walk through our doors so that we can find those people who aren't involved in the community, because we're always asking them, where are you coming from? Where do you live? Oh, I live in Monson. How do I not know you? Like, that we have going on, we have the business association, we have the co-working space, and we just are kind of the information booth for bringing people involved. But it's just, I think, from my perspective, that's just through my business, not.
It's the relational nature of this work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say? You definitely are the information center.
Yeah, I'm right downtown, and But I don't think that all the underserved necessarily come in and buy shottery from me, particularly as I'm having to put my prices up. And because they wouldn't be able to afford that. So I don't think necessarily that I'm reaching, but through a lot of the community work we do with the business community and then those people's kind of outreach, I hope that we're reaching in that way, but no, I don't have an answer.
Okay. Brett?
I think one of the key constituencies, particular to what we're talking about today, are folks who are doing things in their garage or in their home that are sort of off the radar and you don't know about. And so one of the ways that we got them this summer, in the previous summer, was offering pop-up opportunities. And people sort of came out of their kitchen, came out of their garage and self-selected and participated. And now we have a rapport with them and a conversation going with them, and we can loop them in and offer them resources.
You put I don't know, Brad, if it was a system or process, but I was amazed at how many young people were milling around yesterday or whenever, yesterday.
Yesterday,
right. And like had started businesses or were thinking about new businesses and were like actively engaged in the conversations. And
they're helping us design it all. I mean, it's pretty cool.
That's great. That's great. Any other thoughts? Matt, isn't there, I don't know if it was in one of your articles, maybe it was Brookings, there was a quote that said something like, I can't even remember it. It was like reaching the underserved is one of the best economic development opportunities for like a sustainable economy or something like that, reaching those groups.
Yeah, because it's wealth creation. You're building assets and business ownership. And historically that's been missing, or was diluted in some way throughout history. And so yeah, and the business ownership is a way to create something for oneself. And like we were talking about before, especially in rural economies, definitions need to be like more broad, because when we say diversity or what have you, automatically, again, just like with entrepreneurship, our minds go to, I think, race and ethnicity. And you're not going to change the demographics of Monson overnight or whatever. It is what it is. But when you use a broader term and you think about diversity differently, you bring in a lot of different folks.
Right.
And so I think that's really the key.
In Skowhegan, we're thinking about this from a people living in perhaps poverty perspective and how we might engage with our local youth to inspire them, in this area of entrepreneurship and we're not anywhere close to where I'd love to be right now. I think we're just kind of figuring out where we might, dovetail in with maybe the JMG program, the Career and Technical Center. We sent a list of businesses who were interested in hosting apprentices to the local Career and Technical Center as part of our needs assessment. And I think that thinking about it from a mentorship perspective, and we all see the data that your local youth feel when they feel connected to people in the community, they're much more likely to stay and be contributing members of society. And I think that that's something that I know that Rockland's thinking about, and I know other Main Street communities are thinking about youth engagement as a way to inspire and
Yep, and there's someone in Lisbon really interested in like youth entrepreneurship in particular.
His name is John Hansen.
Right.
He's on LinkedIn, Google that, he lives across the river in Durham, but he's actively seeking partners. He's a MIT
engineer, right?
Engineer, and he's got he's taught entrepreneurship courses through MIT with the curriculum they developed. And he's trying to figure out how to offer that at the high school level.
Right.
And probably statewide. So John Hansen, JONHANSON.
Yeah, so we're trying to figure out how to feed him information and connect him to all of you.
Denise mentioned in the chat that the collaborative virtual programming and partnerships have really allowed SCEC to reach underserved populations and individuals, which is moving into other offshoot programs, early college and youth, BIPOC community members, as well as individuals in recovery and transitioning from incarceration.
Yeah.
I think that's been a real highlight from your work, Denise. And I just want to mention I think that I'm remembering this correctly, that in all three of the pilot communities, one of the things that we noticed from the focus groups is that there, in general, locally, there was a high level of local entrepreneurs and businesses understanding where the resources were and who to talk to, you know, and general comfort level with how to get help, you know, when they needed it, but less clarity if you were new coming into the community about who was doing what and who was who, and the sort of landing place and the messaging for people coming in was less developed than that kind of general understanding if you were a local, which I think is kind of key to pay attention to in terms of serving the underserved, you know, everybody outside the community looking in.
Very true. Build.org is a great example of using entrepreneurship to inspire and engage youth. I wonder if John knows about that one, build.org. We'll capture this.
I can make a connection if it's relevant and to the
Great,
team.
thanks, Dave. Thanks, Garvin, for coming.
I've been thinking about this labor issue related to
Oh.
engaging other populations, whether to bring people in communities or in existing in communities. It seems like an enormous challenge, because if you're working with wanting to increase businesses and bring people in and can't find workforce, I mean, it's a state, it's a national issue, but it just seems like a very troubling kind of trend. Like you're an entrepreneur and then you want to scale up to having 2 more employees and you can't find them. That, you know, it's enormous. And it seems like the challenge, really. You know, you want to bring people to Maine or keep people in Maine, and then there are employment opportunities, but somehow, for some reason, it's not matching up with the people who are here. I don't know, some of it could be an issue of training or willingness to work, or I don't know what it is, but it seems like just an enormous challenge.
Yeah, and is it a challenge because of the pandemic, or were we in this position anyway? You know, I mean, I do reflect on that as well.
Well, the Code Me program that was being run at Foxcroft Academy.
Yes.
And I was whining that the woman didn't get back to me. Apparently it closed.
Oh.
So that was the transition program for kids to get to community college and learn about tech. So I think that businesses now, you know, they're wanting to employ like tech savvy people as well. And so, you know, how do we get the kids in rural communities to, you know, think that that's a juicy notion for them? I don't know.
Right.
One thing
I think Martha wanted to jump in here on this topic.
I was just going to say that I can share. I don't know if you all saw the Department of Labor put out survey results. So they surveyed like over 2,000 people that are either on unemployment or are sort of recently out of the workforce, and around those barriers and all of that. And there is no silver bullet. I mean, there's definitely a lot of different reasons that people are not sort of in the workforce, but one of the big pieces was that sort of mismatch between either the skills that they have and the job they want, or sort of figuring out where that job is. So I definitely think there's a bunch of work there. The other really interesting thing was that age discrimination came up as a really high reason that people are having a hard time. And also sort of a disproportionately large number in terms of survey responses were really skewed 50 and above. And a lot of people in their 60s actively looking for work and finding age discrimination. So I would sort of throw the other side also in terms of thinking about that labor force piece is, age at the higher end as well as the lower end is really surfacing as an issue.
Good point.
Martha, you'd asked us, or maybe it was part of the meeting that I was on with KB Cog and a couple weeks ago that you and Heather follows and Heather leading, but thinking about it from really what's happening in our workforce right now, that is, it's a good thing that we can think about as a model for ways to increase more participation in the workforce. And, instead of just assuming that people just don't want to work. And so when someone mentioned Farmington a minute ago, I thought about Origin and the work that business has done. Anecdotally, I've heard that there are people that work there who have really take a lot of pride in what they do. And he's not paying a ton over minimum wage, but they're really proud to be part of that company because it's been highly successful. They've grown pretty significantly, and they take pride in the work when they manufacture jeans and shoes that are like made in Maine and are being sold for huge amounts of money around the country. And so thinking about that as a model and things that we can provide our business owners with, as examples of how they might be able to attract a greater number of people to work for them. I don't know, just an idea.
Great.
I wonder how many other people who have seen businesses that have maybe relocated during the pandemic or maybe just came to Maine before the pandemic are finding that these businesses that are moving from other states are bringing their entire crew with them. We had that happen in Ellsworth. They had some people who stayed remote, but a crew of 23 people moved to the Ellsworth area.
Oh, wow.
This is the same company that's the manufacturer that I told you earlier, Desert Harvest.
Jeez,
Yeah, it's significant. And I just wonder if that's a trend in our state, maybe around the nation, or if it just seems to be a fluke for this situation.
Anybody else have that happen? Martha, do you know of any other examples of an entire workforce relocating for a small scale manufacturing?
I would say we've seen more of like entire larger company departments, so like maybe the whole sales department has relocated or the whole sort of innovation department. I haven't heard a lot about sort of entire companies, but definitely have heard smaller scale departments of like 5 to 10 people within a much larger industry.
Wow.
I'll just jump in and add, Cara, I think in Ellsworth, and correct me if I'm wrong, that whole company voted on going together to move to Ellsworth. I mean, it was like, yeah, it was amazing. And so back to something that Maggie, you said in the chat, Maine has such an edge on place-based, what do we want to say, cachet. I mean, there's a real edge to the market. And I know my little town just above Belfast is making use of people on town committees who are bringing amazing skills. Town committees like the town cemetery committee that I am on. And it's just incredible to see, like, wow. So that's all the news from here.
Thanks, Deb. Anyone else on this topic? Patrick had a Oh, yes. Patrick, I'm going to call on you. Do you want to just summarize your chat?
Yeah, I just was going off of kind of what Matt was talking about with youth engagement. So I'm not currently working for Main Street Skowehgan yet because I'm still the active duty Air Force recruiter in Waterville. And I have the different perspective of I meet with people that want to leave Maine, which is a lot different than the work we're trying to do and attracting people here. So, but the youth, they're always very honest in what could be better in their hometown and what they would like to see, which I think is important because we all used to be youth and now we're the ones kind of trying to change things, and that's going to be them in the future. So just my 2 cents.
That's a great point. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? What do they say is missing?
Yeah.
Thanks for asking that.
I knew someone was going to ask. So really, and sorry, this is so broad, but just the opportunities. I know Maine is, it's built of small towns pretty much until you get down into southern Maine. And I was the same when, I'm from a small town, like 5,000 people in Pennsylvania, right in the middle, smack dab, farm country. And it was the same thing. I'm saying the same thing that the kids tell me today, where it's really just that lack of opportunity. There's nothing going. I've been in the Air Force for 9 years now, and I can still go back home and nothing has changed. So really getting the word out about opportunities and really the programs that we're doing to engage with people, to give them resources. And honestly, I think one of the biggest problems is, maybe it's not a problem, but you don't know what you don't know. And there's so many people that just haven't heard about, all the resources that our programs offer, or they're, you kind of get involved with the same group of people. And if that group of people, they don't know what's going on, or perhaps you don't have a friend group that really has, you don't have friends that have larger visions. They don't have a, bigger picture of what they want to do with their lives. They just stay at home and, play games, or, stay in the same small town, all of that. So, sorry, I don't have, specific examples, but I think that we can get that if we do engage with more youth. So hopefully that helps.
I think you were right on, actually, and lots of people in the comments are too, Patrick, so thank you.
And thinking about, I just would pull out in relation to that, Denise's comment about just increasing the awareness of and our storytelling about what those opportunities are. Because I'm thinking about, here's our team in Lisbon who stumbled on a maker, yesterday that they didn't even know about, and they're the people paying attention. So of course the young people in that community don't know about that entrepreneur who's hidden in plain sight, and there are tons of examples like that. But Denise's point about the owner transition and succession planning issue we've seen in all the pilot communities and in most other communities we work in, that one of the greatest opportunities in Maine is business ownership taking over from someone who needs to retire and wants that business to stay open. Because I think when young people can bring their vision to an existing business, that's a real opportunity.
Absolutely.
And what we're finding in Washington County, and we've done some work around ownership transition. There's definitely more work to be done. But it feels like that success story of transition is almost a coincidence. Whereas if there was a go-to spot or something where young people or people who are, 60 plus who are looking for opportunities could connect with and see like, oh, here are these opportunities, I might be interested in this. I mean, that just leads to a whole bunch of other economic benefits of people staying here and seeing those opportunities here.
Yeah, live, work, Maine, right.
Yeah.
Christina said there's opportunity for them in there as well, I agree.
Yeah. Central repository of like different businesses that want, to be purchased. For people looking to purchase a business, that would be interesting.
Yeah. Yep, and Denise, you worked with Maine Cooperative Development Group, or SCEC did. They had the training about employee-owned businesses, which we've also done a session on as well, talking about another transition type, but yeah.
So we definitely want to hear about who and what you all need.
New topic. Shout it out, raise your hand, or put it in the chat.
Yeah, something that came during our conversations in Monson was around, I think Maine has a great setup, and we talk a lot about like business 101, right?
Yeah.
Here's a template to build your business plan. Here's the very beginning stuff, just the immediate stuff that you need. But when I started my business, like coming from the corporate world after 20 years, I have the basic foundation, but what I'm missing is the 201. And the people I would, so I was like shopping around my business case just to find resources when I first moved to Maine. And I would present my business case, and then they would say like, oh, well, here, I have another template, right? That was just their automatic, like, here's a business case template. Well, I already have it completed. Like,
Right.
well, what, I need help from somebody
Okay.
who's been there, but it's this 201. I think that's what we were kind of calling it in our discussions, is business 201. Once you get that first level of knowledge.
That came up in almost every one of the sessions, whether it was like professional service providers as well being 201, like capital stack and understanding legal structures that might allow for, equity injection or what have you. Like there was just this sort of disconnect at that level.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Dave?
Yeah, it's kind of just took it right from me. That is the number one thing that I've been hearing when I talk to entrepreneurships is and specifically thinking in terms of understanding term sheets. A little bit of like what you're talking about too, with like the different type of pitch deck that you would have going to somebody like Maine Angels versus going to your local kind of credit union, and then understanding the way the cap table is structured and how changes to cap table can affect partner structures. Like those things that, I guess we would call that kind of 201, but really specific to small scale venture raises, or even just kind of understanding how to structure a pitch deck for that audience is like the number one thing that I'm hearing as I talk to people that are like, what do I do next? I did friends and family, I did micro loan. How do I go from here to there? And that's kind of, we're hearing that a lot.
It's just a recognition too, that as you grow, the complexities of the business change, either on the financial, but it can be just as like, well, now I need to hire some people. What are HR rules? Or I need an accountant because my financials are a lot more complex than they were before. It's like it goes throughout again the life cycle of business.
That's great.
So I just noticed Sarah Joy became visible, and not that I want to put you on the spot, Sarah Joy or Martha, but I do think I can fairly confidently say that there are a number of resources in Maine in our ecosystem related to this 201. And I wonder if you want to mention any of them, or if we want to make a list or send those resources out in the follow-up.
Yeah, so I'm happy to make a list and send them as a follow-up. Make sure I don't leave anyone off the list. But I do think that there's opportunity for growth in this support in the second level of business development. So absolutely keep raising that as a need, and we'll continue to champion that case.
That's great. Sarah Joy was here with us, you guys. Now she's on the screen.
I know, it's like, how did she transition so quick?
She's really magical.
I know how to move around.
Other needs. Denise said seed funding for startups. Okay. What else do you guys see?
How are folks understanding like the people who have like either remote, like move for remote work, or have either like distributed teams, like understanding like how many of those are in your community and like type of industries that they're in? I'm struggling to get a sense of that as kind of Maggie and I were talking about that. There's so many new people that are moving to Rockland and this area specifically, and they're working on these great projects, and I hear about it at dinner parties, and I'm like, how many more of these are there, and how do you find them?
Sounds like a great project for your AmeriCorps fellow. Some kind of survey. I don't know, Matt, are there any wonder ways for communities to find out, for people who might be under the radar of, they don't have a bricks and mortar?
Yeah. But I think
well, and Liz has done a lot of work on this. So we may want to let her say something too. And there's some good examples in Maine. Certainly when we moved to Bath years ago, the realtors were conspiring together to hold welcome events for all the people who had bought homes in the community. And I know that in the Down East Innovation Network, we've been talking about this collaboration with realtors in particular. Sorry to cut you off, Matt.
No.
I'd love to actually kick the question to Martha. I know we had Ryan.
It's like a hot potato.
I know we've had Ryan Wallace at the Maine Center for Economic and Business Research at USM did his PhD on remote workers after he and I started talking about this about 5 or 6 years ago. And because I was calling up the Department of Labor saying, do you know that there's 120 IBM employees in Maine? I just found out because, somebody in my running club, is an HR person for IBM. And I've really been interested in finding ways to collect data and then use that data to develop more job work opportunities in Maine by being able to go to, for example, IBM and say, we want to formally welcome you as an employer in Maine. And are there other positions that we can train people to fill for you? That sort of thing. But my understanding is that we, besides some informal surveys that are done, the real way to get data, the best way to get data, but that's hard, is through Maine Revenue Service tax data, which they don't like to give up easily. And then I've also had this idea of if we had an actual system of physical innovation centers, so maker and co-work and retail spaces that had a network of hosts that were actually meeting people walking in the door, that they could start to collect data and share that data as part of, if they're getting funding from the state. But as far as I know yet, there is no system existing, but that some of the recommendations that we've made over the past few years that Martha has carried forward and made those recommendations to people who have the capacity to do something about them. But is she still here or is she gone? Martha?
I'm still here.
Just like one of my pet projects, but I have zero control. So I'm curious what your current thoughts are.
Yeah, actually, I might just wait. I think that I'm going to be talking about some of the uses of the federal money that connects to a lot of these discussions. So if I could punt it to that piece of the discussion, I think that would be great.
We absolutely are okay with that. Okay, other ideas?
I would say just on the artisans and makers, one tool that you may explore is the existing platforms, web-based platforms that so many use, especially Etsy, where you can do a zip code search by category. I think Makers Row, you can do something similar. So, or Amazon, try to figure out contacts through these platforms, which a lot of them are on. So that might be another avenue.
Great idea. Other things people need. These are good ideas so far. Okay. Maggie?
I'm just writing notes.
Okay, are we ready to transition to the wrap?
I think we are, and maybe we'll just go to you, Martha, since we already kind of teed up that conversation. There's so much happening right now in terms of resources and grants, and everybody knows all of this federal money for recovery has been coming to Maine, and it's pretty hard to keep track of all of this. And so we thought that Martha might have some things to share with all of you who are working locally, because of course you're really close to all the entrepreneurs and businesses who can benefit from some of these resources. So we asked Martha to say a few words about things that we should know.
Okay. If I can share. Yes, I think I've got it now.
You do.
Whoops. Okay, so the first is the ARPA federal money is a humongous elephant, and I'm not at all talking about any of the money that came to municipalities or counties, but this is the money that was discretionary money that came to the state, was proposed by the governor as the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan, was approved by the legislature with them putting their special take on a few various things, and is now poised to be implemented when it goes into law October 18th. And the first I would say is just a couple pieces I've sort of added to this as I've been listening to everything this morning. One is that what I'm talking about today is really the things that are within DCD, my department's control. So I'll talk about those things, but also just wanted to acknowledge that there are other initiatives that cross over multiple agencies that connect to to a lot of the work that you all are doing. And so there is kind of that recognition that we've got to figure out the pieces that cross over agencies. The other is that a lot of the concepts that we've talked about today really align with those intersections of the strategies of the Maine strategic plan, which is, the thing that I live and breathe every day. And some of those are within the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan, and some of them are not. And then there are other things in the plan that are in the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan to be funded by federal that are not in the strategic plan. So I'm really kind of focused in that intersection space, and that it really connects a lot with what you're doing. The last thing I would say is that the system of deploying this money at the state is still being built out, and it's being built out quickly, and there's a lot of turnaround quickly. And if I were not being recorded, I would say we're having a really hard time doing Denise's piece about building together and not for, because of the way that the money, sort of the system that the money is flowing from. And so I would say threading the needle of how to make this money work for those key strategies that are so important for the state is going to be challenging and a lot of hard work. So I just would ask people for some patience around that as we try to work on that piece. That said, this is the money that sort of right now that DCD has available that we are working on in year one of this ARPA money, these dollar amounts. And I've laid these out into the buckets of sort of the cadence of how this money is going to be rolled out. So I mostly want to focus on the first three, because these are going to be the first three that will go out and are the ones that are sort of, I think, most relevant to you all. The first is we really heard loud and clear, our partners out in the community need time to sort of know what's coming and get geared up and provide that key technical assistance piece. So the first thing that we will be rolling out is grants for technical assistance partners to really know what's going on. And so that's the piece we're working on right now. So, Main Street programs, ethnic-based community groups that are working within particular communities, and all the way to sort of the EDDs are all, well, we're going to have funding to help support the pieces that you guys have noticed in your communities that need to be done, and to help people get geared up for applying for the money. And you'll see it was put into the bucket of supporting new businesses and entrepreneurs, but we're going to take a pretty broad view of what a new business and entrepreneur is. The other is that we have economic recovery grants that look a lot like the state's economic recovery grants under the CARES Act. It's a pretty big catch-all of sort of businesses and nonprofits that really suffered through COVID. And then we're going to have 5 million for new businesses and entrepreneurs that really fell through the cracks because of their timing of when they were either established or acquired. We definitely saw a lot of companies that, you know, couldn't look back over 3 years and say, yes, we had lost, that sort of thing. So making sure that we are capturing those new businesses. The next tranche of money that is coming out is going to be loan and loan guarantees through FAME. And then if you've noticed, the yellow are the things that I thought are most interesting for this particular group. So one of the ones that I think is really important to that succession plan conversation is that there's money and it's going to run through FAME, but we don't know. We're hoping it can be grants. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but really to support emerging business and financial models. So recognizing that people have come up with really innovative and different both business models and financial funding models and how to better support those. So on the business side, that could be co-ops getting benefit corporation, going B Corp, that sort of thing. On the financing model, looking at things like revenue-based financing, exactly what David was talking about, helping people sort of figure out what are the different ways that I can do funding for my business. Do I have to do venture? Do I have to do debt? You know, that sort of thing. And then the other really important one is in this the third tranche is business diversity and entrepreneurship. So really recognizing the barriers that people are having that represent underrepresented founders. And we're hoping to do this in partnership with state procurement to do some sort of a set-aside process for accessing state business for diversity, for diverse business owners. And then the two other pieces I wanted to talk about specifically to the conversation we just had around sort of remote workers or diverse or dispersed workers is the idea of co-working and collaborative spaces as key community welcoming points of entry for new people and remote workers. So there'll be some money there trying to kind of build out that system, again, to sort of understand what remote workers are here, how they are connecting, that sort of thing. And then also that welcoming infrastructure. And some of that is really block and tackle. Like if I work here in Maine, do I have to file, like, how do I file my taxes if my employer's somewhere else and I'm in Maine, or vice versa for employers? I've got 20 employees in Maine, but I'm in Pennsylvania. How do I figure out how to do all that? So some of that is just that really tactical stuff, but then also trying to get that out into the community. So I'm gonna stop. No, I have one more. So the other, we have 2 points of information that we're trying to keep updated. So one, we have a website that's just recovery grants that will continue as we start to roll things out. We'll put them all there. We also are continuing to try to build out the Maine Resource Compass and have a specific section for financing and grants. So that will continue to be built out. And then last but not least, with Sarah Joy on, we actually are announcing we are doing the next round of co-working development fund grants. So separate from ARPA, there's 200,000 over the next 2 years to support co-working spaces. And Sarah Joy will be managing that process. And then I also just wanted to let people know this is a bit of a dream, but it is in process. We're working really hard for there to be a common app portal for public business applications. So the idea that FAME and MTI and Maine Rural Development Authority and the EDD revolving loans and CDFIs are all looking for some level of the same information. And if we can have a, you know, sort of a data inventory spot where people can feel that their business information is safe, but then could be shared so they're not having to do 25 different applications to access the different public funding opportunities. That is work that we're trying to do in order to make this these public funds more easily accessible. So I'm going to stop sharing. That was a whole heck of a lot of information in a really short amount of time. And we will all just keep working on it.
Martha, would you share those slides with me? Thank you.
Yes.
So I can get them out.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I've seen you smile so much when you said, and Sarah Joy is going to do this, like to have a person.
Yes, what was the hazard of 1? Now it's a hazard of 2. Woohoo!
Questions for Martha? Stu.
I understand there are a lot of funds that have gone straight to like the county commissioners. And they're not, as I understand it, at least in my county, equipped to really handle that. But it seems like it's a large amount of money. And do you know anything about that process and how people might access that?
Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of information. I do know that we're hearing a lot of that same thing.
Yeah.
Definitely have seen people using the Maine Municipal Association as sort of a technical assistance location around. What they're tending to do is giving both counties and municipalities sort of safe harbor things that the money can be spent on. So definitely not sort of highest and best use, but if you use the money on this, it's not going to get taken away from you sort of approach. So I think there is a lot of work and opportunity around leveraging the different sort of ARPA buckets and making it more effective. But I will say, I don't see that it is happening at the state level. You know, candidly, everyone has their hands full just trying to make sure that we can get the money that's coming to the state out the door. And the last thing I would just say with that is that I definitely would see sort of big chunks of this money going out also to, you know, sort of third-party providers. This is across the whole ARPA piece. But we are being held to the state's normal procurement processes, which tend to be not very fast. So I'm trying to push things out as quickly as possible, but it will continue to be a slog to do it well. And
Other questions?
That's a really technical term, slog.
We like that.
Yeah, and I do see the question from Amy right now. So the larger Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan is being managed sort of as a whole portfolio through the governor's office for policy innovation and the future. So I expect that they will have a broader communication plan and presence to help, you know, sort of overall people understanding where all the money is going and all of those sorts of things. We definitely will keep our website updated, but I am really hoping that those sort of technical assistant grants and partnerships that we'll be able to put in place will really help get that money out through all of the distributed networks. You know, to Patrick's point, you know, you should not have to know me or Sarah Joy in order to know about this money. And so, you know, trying to really use a distributed network as much as possible.
Right. Maggie, should I add on the 3 federal sources that we have applied to right now that touch this work? Okay. Just so everyone's aware, the Maine Downtown Center applied for a congressionally directed spending request with our 2 senators to replicate the entrepreneur ecosystem work. We had 9 communities want to be part of that request, 7 main streets and 2 affiliate programs. We were shortlisted by both senators, which is a great position to be in, but we have not heard yet. Everything in Washington is otherwise focused on other stuff. So we remain optimistic, but we don't know.
I heard end of January, so we'll know.
What? Okay, end of January, all right.
Just to, you know, help with expectations.
Thanks, that's true, that's true.
Okay.
All right. And then we were part of an SBA Community Navigators program with the National Main Street Center. We were one of 7 coordinated programs, Matt? Something like that, anyway, that decided to join that proposal. We consulted with Martha about whether we'd be part of a Maine proposal, but we decided to be part of Main Street America's proposal, and that is with the 10 main streets. It is for specific small business training and relief and connecting to SBA sources. We talked a lot about the things that mattered here in Maine, top of mind, workforce. So we have not heard about that. Everybody,
October, I think.
Yeah, it was-
Expectation is.
right, so
They
hopefully. in
did
the
say
next
October.
weeks. It is October? Okay, all right. And then the only other thing, I guess I would just be remiss not to say that Martha is well aware of, you know, what the downtown center can assist and how we can assist any of her work and her need to distribute funds. And, you know, we have an open line of communication as well. So that's it from my end. It's a waiting game.
I would also just add one more. I should have mentioned around the SBA Community Navigator grant opportunity, the state, so the Main Street program put in for the larger tier 1, which is up to 5 million, and the state put in for a tier 2, which is 2.5 million. And we really looked at trying to complement different applications. The other one that went in was the city of Portland that did a tier 3. So we had one at 5 million, we had one at 2.5 and one at 1 million. And so we'll see if hopefully those will all complement each other, but we really focused on 15 different spokes, really trying to reach pockets of underrepresented communities within Maine. So, you know, working with 4 Directions, with Black Owned Maine, with the Third Place, with some folks in Lewis and Auburn. I'm not going to have everybody, but I think between the 3 projects, if we were to get them, it would really be a nice complementary covering of a lot of the ecosystem.
Sure would. It would be so powerful. So that's the update from me and Martha.
So the other thing we wanted to just alert people to and ask you to save the date is that we are having another virtual forum in October. It's October 25th from 2 until 3:30. And that session is hosted by Anne and Martha and Liz and myself. And we've invited, and he has confirmed, Andy Stoll from the Kauffman Foundation. And the focus of that whole conversation in that forum is to talk about 2 things. One is something we've talked about today, which is trying to knit together our place-based, more local, community-based ecosystem building efforts with our larger ecosystem in Maine, supporting entrepreneurs and innovation. And we know that those connections are happening in some places, and we wanted to open up a larger conversation about that particular piece of our ecosystem, how we knit those things together. And then the second part of that conversation will be this whole idea of building an inclusive ecosystem, what that means, who we're missing, and how we can address some of those gaps. So Andy's going to help open that conversation up for us. And then during the registration process, we're also going to be gathering some stories and asking folks who are coming to that forum to share some of the stories from their work that might be useful for our group. So that session's open to any and all members of our ecosystem in Maine. thinking about supporting entrepreneurship, innovation, small businesses, large businesses, and everything in between. The registration information will be coming out from the Community Foundation. We're building that Eventbrite right now, and we'll send that out through all of our networks, certainly the 4 hosts of the forum, but we'll get that to the list of everybody who attended today, because I think it'll be a really useful and productive conversation for all of us, especially as a follow-up to many of the things that we talked about today. So save the date.
So that.
If I could I add one more quick thing? I'm sorry, just about neat things that are happening. The Down East Innovation Network is doing a really cool event on October 6th in the afternoon on being able to hear from entrepreneurs. We're calling it Entrepreneurs Live, and anyone is invited, and it's from 2 to 3:30. And the neat thing is, Denise Silly has been working very closely with us to identify entrepreneurs who've been part of the Pathways program. And we have a great variety of businesses in different stages of development, as well as in different sectors. And we met with some of those presenters, and Gemma, if I might be so bold to say, Gemma is going to be one of them, and we're delighted that you will be. So there's a wonderful crossover between this effort and also the other. And so I'll pop my email address into the chat, and feel free to give a yell if you'd like to get on our list on that. It's going to be lively, and
so
people
fun.
are just so articulate. We also just have some people who are very straightforward about what's missing, but also what has been really helpful. So, I mean, that's the thing. I get to hear the sort of preview when we're getting people ready for it. So I just wanted to say it's going to be great.
Thanks. That's
Thank
great,
you, Deb.
Deb.
I can't believe that I didn't have that on my bullet points to share either.
I could also share one more quick thing, and it's fine, Maggie. This is why, we all do, it's called collaboration. In November, we're going to have, we do once a month, every Wednesday at noontime, smash ups, and that's our virtual networking time, and people show up between noon and 1. And in November, we're going to hear from a life sciences hub that's beginning to emerge down east. That's very exciting, with different organizations that are coming together to think about how they might advance life sciences. So they will be the featured speaker. Sometimes we have the smash ups as just an open time to share information, and sometimes it's just cooking with all sorts of things. Often it's cooking.
I'll be sure to share that in the follow-up email, Deb.
Thank you.
10-6 and SCEC Innovation Center.
Thank you.
So, I mean, I think the only thing that's left is to say a big thank you to Matt, especially for all of your work with us over the last 18 months and for the next couple of months. And to Anne for just, holding this all together so gracefully and artfully, in addition to everything else that you're juggling. And to the communities, we've really loved working with you. And I think we've all learned a lot from your experiences. And big thank you to Martha, and to Liz, Denise, Deb, Sarah Joy, all the folks who have been involved in the thinking around this work and some of the other pieces connected to it. And
to Maine Community Foundation, Maggie. We have to remember, Matt tells Maine all the time that this has not happened in other states nationally, where the Community Foundation has stepped up to really provide funding for implementation, not just a plan that sits on the shelf. So thank you to the Community Foundation. I think that's the big thank you.
Thank you, Anne. And this has just been really great. So I just want to thank everybody who's been with us today. It's been really inspiring, as Amy noted in the chat, and I think we've all come away with something new to think about or been reminded about something great. And obviously, we need to get out and visit all these communities, even though we're feeling so restricted by COVID these days. still have time for lots of outdoor experiences.